The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Victoria, we need to talk about your future with the company. But Victoria Hale wasn't thinking about her future as CEO. She was thinking about the project manager standing in her doorway, the widowed single father who'd just heard her confess the one truth she'd never spoken aloud. No one has ever chosen me. In that glass tower high above the sleeping city, two people who'd survived impossible loss were about to discover that survival was only the beginning. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The skyline of Chicago stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victoria Hale's corner office, 42 stories above Michigan Avenue. At midnight on a Tuesday in late October, the city glowed like scattered diamonds against black velvet, beautiful and distant. Victoria stood with one palm pressed against the cold glass, her reflection ghostly in the darkness beyond. A slender woman in an expensive charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back in a style that suggested control, her posture radiating the kind of authority that came from 14 years of fighting for every inch of power she possessed. But tonight, authority felt hollow. Her phone buzzed for the third time in 10 minutes. She ignored it. The quarterly reports could wait. The merger discussions could wait. Everything that had consumed her waking hours for the past decade suddenly felt impossibly small compared to the weight pressing against her chest, the kind of loneliness that no amount of success could fill. She hadn't meant to stay this late. She never meant to. Yet here she was, as she had been every Tuesday for the past month, finding reasons to linger after everyone else had gone home, finding reasons to be here when Daniel Reed returned to finish the work he couldn't complete during normal hours, when he had to pick up his daughter from school, help with homework, make dinner, be present for bedtime stories. Daniel understood responsibilities that pulled in opposing directions. He understood sacrifice. Maybe that's why she'd let her guard down. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her turn. Daniel appeared in the doorway, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, surprise registering on his face when he saw her still there. Victoria. He paused, one hand on the doorframe. I thought you'd left hours ago. I thought the same about you, she replied, managing a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The Harrison proposal? Still wrestling with the budget projections. Daniel stepped into the office, and even in the dim light from the city beyond, Victoria could see the fatigue written in the lines around his eyes. At 38, Daniel Reed had the kind of face that suggested quiet strength, not classically handsome, but striking in its honesty. His brown hair was slightly disheveled, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that suggested he spent his weekends doing something more active than golf with investors. Lily had a school project tonight. I promised I'd help her build a model of the solar system. And did you? Papier-mâché Saturn is currently drying on our kitchen table. The corner of his mouth lifted in a tired smile. It's lopsided, but she's proud of it. Something in Victoria's chest tightened. She could picture it perfectly. The kitchen table covered in newspapers, the child's concentration, the father's patience. A world entirely separate from conference rooms and profit margins. A world she would never inhabit. How old is she now? Victoria asked, though she knew the answer. She'd made it her business to know everything about her employees, and Daniel Reed had been on her radar since he joined Hale Innovations 18 months ago. Not because of his work, though that was exemplary, but because of what she'd seen in his eyes during their first meeting, a recognition of loss that mirrored something she'd tried to bury so deep no one would ever find it. 7. Daniel's expression softened the way it always did when he spoke of his daughter. Just turned 7 last month. The butterfly party. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly. You remembered that. You took 2 days off, requested them 6 months in advance. Victoria turned back to the window, uncomfortable with the vulnerability in his gaze. I remember everything, Daniel. It's my job. Is that why you're still here at midnight? Remembering things? The question was gentle, but it landed like a stone in still water, rippling outward into territories Victoria had carefully marked as forbidden. She should deflect. She should make an excuse about quarterly reports or international calls or any of the 1,000 reasons a CEO might be in her office at this hour. Instead, she heard herself say, I'm here because going home means walking into an empty apartment and realizing that all of this. She gestured at the office around them, the city beyond, the empire she'd built, doesn't mean anything when there's no one waiting. The silence that followed was profound. Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. In 14 years of running this company, she had never admitted weakness. Not to her board, not to her investors, not even to herself in the private darkness of her bedroom when sleep refused to come. But something about this moment, this man, this hour, when the rest of the world slept and only the wounded remained awake, something had cracked the armor she'd spent a lifetime forging. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, straightening her shoulders. "That was inappropriate. You should get to your daughter. I'm sure she's waiting. She's at my sister's tonight." Daniel didn't move from the doorway. "She stays there every Tuesday and Thursday while I catch up on work. My sister has 3 kids of her own. Lily loves playing with her cousins." Victoria nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Can I tell you something, Victoria?" She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Of course." "I know exactly what you mean about the empty apartment." The admission hung between them like a confession. Daniel moved further into the office, setting his laptop bag on one of the leather chairs that faced Victoria's desk. 3 years, he continued, his voice quiet but steady. 3 years since Sarah died, and I still wake up some mornings reaching for her side of the bed. Still cook too much food for dinner because I forget it's just Lily and me now. The house we bought together, every room has a memory, and sometimes the memories are louder than Lily's laughter. Victoria's throat constricted. She knew the basics of Daniel's story, of course. It was in his personnel file. Wife deceased, single parent. But knowing facts and hearing the raw truth of someone's grief were entirely different experiences. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't." Daniel's expression was kind. "But I think maybe you needed to hear that you're not the only one who understands loneliness, even when you're surrounded by people." "Your daughter is the light of my life," Daniel finished, "and I would burn the world down to keep her safe and happy. But love and loneliness aren't mutually exclusive, Victoria. You can be surrounded by love and still feel profoundly alone." Victoria's hands trembled slightly. She clasped them behind her back, a habit from years of board meetings when she couldn't afford to show uncertainty. "I was engaged once," she heard herself say. The words emerged like prisoners escaping after years of solitary confinement. 10 years ago, Dr. Marcus Chen, brilliant surgeon. We met at a charity gala, started dating, made sense on paper. He proposed after 18 months. "What happened?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "I got sick." The 2 words seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. Daniel went very still. "Stage 2 breast cancer," Victoria continued, the clinical terms easier than the emotional reality. "I was 32. They caught it early enough, but the treatment, chemo, radiation, surgery. I lost my hair, lost weight, lost the ability to have children." Her voice remained steady through sheer force of will. "Marcus stayed through the first round of chemo, held my hand while I vomited, told me I was beautiful when I was bald and terrified. But by the second round, the excuses started. Late nights at the hospital, conference calls he couldn't miss. And then one night, he just said it." "Said what?" Daniel's voice was carefully controlled, but Victoria could hear the edge beneath. That he'd signed up for a partner, not a patient. That he wanted children someday, a normal life. That he'd tried, but he couldn't. Her voice finally cracked. He couldn't choose someone who might not survive, who definitely couldn't give him the future he'd imagined. The tears came before she could stop them, silent and scalding. Victoria turned back to the window, mortified by her loss of composure. In her entire tenure as CEO, she had never cried in front of an employee, never showed this kind of weakness. But Daniel didn't look at her like she was weak. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. He was a coward. He was honest. Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara she didn't care about. Most men just disappear without explanation. He at least had the decency to articulate it. "No." Daniel moved closer, and Victoria could feel the warmth of him in the cold office. "Honesty would have been admitting he wasn't strong enough to stand beside you. Instead, he made it about you being broken. You weren't broken, Victoria. You were surviving." Something inside Victoria's chest split open at those words. She'd spent 10 years believing Marcus had been right, that cancer had made her less than. That survival had come at the cost of ever being chosen, ever being loved, ever being anything more than a CEO who went home to an empty apartment and pretended that success was enough. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I'm not. I can't." "Can't what?" Daniel's voice was gentle but insistent. "Can't be loved, can't be chosen, or can't forgive yourself for surviving." The question shattered something Victoria had been holding together through sheer determination. She turned to face him fully, and in the darkness of her office, with the city lights painting shadows across his face, she saw something she hadn't allowed herself to hope for in a decade. Understanding, acceptance, choice. "I'm 42 years old," she said, her voice breaking. "I run a company worth $2 billion. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I can influence markets, make decisions that affect thousands of people, build empires from ideas. But I go home every night to an apartment that echoes. I eat dinner alone. I celebrate victories alone. I face my cancer screenings every 6 months alone, terrified that this time the monster will come back." She took a shuddering breath. "No man has ever chosen me. Not my father, who left when I was 6. Not my fiancé, who ran when I got sick. Not anyone in the 10 years since. They see the power, the money, the position, but they don't see me. And the ones who might have seen me, they ran when they realized I come with scars and infertility and a medical history that reads like a horror novel." "Victoria, I thought I'd made peace with it," she continued, unable to stop now that the dam had broken. "Told myself that success was enough, that changing the world through innovation mattered more than changing diapers or sharing breakfast, that I could be complete without being chosen. But tonight, standing here, I realized I've been lying to myself for a decade. I'm lonely, Daniel. I'm so desperately lonely that some nights I can't breathe through the weight of it." The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria waited for Daniel to make an excuse, to back away, to remember the professional boundaries between them, and retreat to safe distance. She'd just confessed the deepest truth of her existence to an employee, someone who reported to her senior management team, someone who could weaponize this vulnerability if he chose. But Daniel Reed didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped forward, closing the distance between them until Victoria could see flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could smell the faint scent of coffee and something clean in cedar. "I would choose you," he said simply. Victoria's breath caught. You can't." "I can. I do." Daniel's voice was steady, certain. "You think scars make you unchosen? Victoria, we're all scarred. Sarah's death scarred me in ways I'm still discovering. Being a single parent scars me every day when I see Lily missing the mother she barely remembers. Life scars us. That's not weakness. That's proof we've lived. But I can't give you children," Daniel finished gently. "I have a daughter who needs more love than I can provide alone." "You think infertility makes you less? It doesn't. It just means family looks different than the magazine covers suggest. You barely know me. I know you stayed late 73 times in the past 6 months." Victoria's eyes widened and Daniel's mouth curved into a sad smile. "You think you're the only one who notices things? I've watched you, Victoria. Watched how you remember every employee's birthday, how you funded the scholarship program for underprivileged kids without public announcement, how you personally called the family of our warehouse worker who died last spring and made sure his widow's pension was doubled. You think people don't see you? I see you. And what I see is someone who's convinced herself she has to be alone because life dealt her an impossible hand." Victoria was trembling now, her entire body vibrating with emotions she'd suppressed for years. "I'm your boss," she whispered. "This is inappropriate. The power dynamic is something we would need to navigate carefully," Daniel agreed. "I'm not suggesting we ignore the complexities. I'm saying that maybe, just maybe, some things are worth the complexity. You could lose your job. I could lose my reputation. The board can go to hell." The vehemence in Daniel's voice startled Victoria. "I've spent 3 years surviving instead of living, playing it safe, doing what was expected, being responsible. And I'm drowning in the safety of it, Victoria. Drowning in the loneliness of doing everything right and ending up alone anyway." He reached out slowly, giving her time to step back, to refuse, to maintain the professional distance that should exist between them. But Victoria didn't move. She stood frozen as Daniel's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were still falling. "I would choose you," he repeated, his voice breaking on the words. "Scars and all, infertility and all, cancer history and all. I would choose the woman who builds empires and cries alone in her office at midnight. I would choose the CEO who remembers her employees' children's names and the survivor who's terrified of her own vulnerability. I would choose all of you, Victoria Hale, if you would let me." The kiss happened so gradually that Victoria couldn't identify the moment it began. One second they were standing apart, the next her hands were fisted in Daniel's shirt, and his arms were around her waist, and their mouths were meeting in a kiss that tasted like salt and coffee, and years of loneliness finally cracking open into possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria's mind was reeling. "We can't do this," she said, but her hands were still gripping his shirt, still holding him close. "The company policy will disclose it to HR," Daniel said immediately. "Full transparency. I'll transfer to a different team if necessary. We'll do everything by the book. People will talk. Let them. They'll say I promoted you because of this, that you're sleeping your way to the top. Then I won't accept any promotions." Daniel's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Victoria, I don't care about my career trajectory. I care about you, about this, about the possibility that maybe we're both done being alone." Victoria's laugh was shaky, disbelieving. "This is insane. We work together. I'm your boss's boss. You have a daughter who comes first. I have a company to run. My medical history is yours to share if and when you want," Daniel interrupted gently. "I'm not asking you to figure out forever tonight, Victoria. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that you deserve to be chosen, that we both do." For the first time in 10 years, Victoria allowed herself to hope. It was terrifying. "I have a 6-month cancer screening in 2 weeks," she heard herself say. "I've faced everyone alone for a decade. I'm always terrified they'll find something, that it's come back." "Then you won't face this one alone," Daniel said simply. "If you want me there, I'll be there." "Why?" The question emerged as a whisper. "Why would you choose this?" "Choose me? You could find someone easier, someone without complications." "Because easy is overrated." Daniel's smile was sad and knowing. "Because I've spent 3 years being responsible and safe and appropriate, and it's killing me slowly. Because when I look at you, I don't see complications. I see someone who understands that life is complicated and chooses to keep living anyway." "I don't know how to do this," Victoria admitted. "I've spent so long building walls." "So we learn together." Daniel pressed his forehead against hers, and Victoria closed her eyes, breathing him in. One day at a time, one choice at a time, starting with this one. What choice? The choice to try, to risk it, to step out of the safety of loneliness and see what happens when two people who've survived impossible things dare to build something together. Victoria pulled back enough to see his face clearly. "You really mean this? You're not going to run when it gets difficult, when the reality sets in." "I'm a widowed single father who works 60-hour weeks and goes home to an empty bed every night," Daniel said bluntly. "I know difficult, Victoria. I live difficult. And I'm still standing here asking you to take a chance on something that might be complicated and messy and completely against company policy." Does that sound like someone who runs from hard things? It didn't. Victoria knew Daniel's file, knew his track record of steady reliability, knew that he'd been turning down better job offers for 18 months because changing companies would disrupt Lily's routine. This was a man who showed up day after day, even when showing up was agonizing. "Okay," she whispered, and felt the word reshape her future. "Okay, but we do this right. HR disclosure, clear boundaries at work. And we take it slow with your daughter." "I won't. I can't. I won't be another person who disappoints her." "Lily is tougher than you think," Daniel said softly. "But yes, slow, careful, responsible, all of those things." "This is insane," Victoria repeated, but she was smiling now, really smiling, and it felt like muscles waking up after years of disuse. "Completely insane," Daniel agreed. He kissed her again, gentler this time, a promise rather than a question. "But maybe the best things are." They stood together in the darkness of Victoria's office as the city slept around them, two survivors who'd spent years building walls, discovering what it felt like when those walls finally came down. It wasn't neat or simple or uncomplicated. But for the first time in a decade, Victoria Hale felt something more powerful than loneliness. She felt chosen. The week that followed was surreal. Victoria moved through board meetings and investor calls in a haze of disbelief, half convinced she'd imagined the entire encounter. But then her phone would buzz with a text from Daniel, something simple like, "How's your morning?" or a photo of Lily's latest drawing, and the reality would settle over her like a warm blanket. They were actually doing this. On Thursday morning, they met in the HR director's office together. Patricia Chen was 63, unflappable, and had worked for Hale Innovations since its founding. When Victoria and Daniel walked in together, clearly nervous, Patricia simply gestured to the chairs across from her desk. "I was wondering when you two would show up," she said mildly. Victoria's stomach dropped. "You knew?" "Honey, I've been in HR for 40 years. You think I don't notice when the CEO starts leaving the office at the same time as a project manager? 3 times a week? When she starts remembering his daughter's birthday? When he starts finding excuses to attend meetings he doesn't need to be in?" Patricia smiled kindly. "I'm not judging. I'm glad you're here being responsible about it." "We want to do this right," Daniel said firmly. "Full disclosure. Whatever transfers or policy accommodations are necessary." "Daniel isn't in my direct reporting line," Victoria interrupted. "He reports to Sarah Chen in operations, who reports to Marcus in the C-suite. There's no direct conflict." "But there's perception," Patricia noted. "And perception matters. Here's what I recommend. Daniel, you transfer to the Innovation Lab project. Completely separate division, different budget, different management chain. No chance of Victoria's decisions affecting your career advancement. You both sign the company's consensual relationship agreement, and we make it clear that this relationship will not impact professional decisions." "I don't want special treatment," Daniel said immediately. "You won't get it," Patricia assured him. "But you also won't be penalized for it. This is about protecting both of you and protecting the company." She looked at Victoria seriously. "Are you sure about this? It's going to be complicated. People will talk." "Let them," Victoria said, echoing Daniel's words from their midnight conversation. "I've spent 10 years doing everything perfectly and being miserable. I'm done prioritizing perception over possibility." Patricia's expression softened. "Good. It's about damn time you let yourself be happy, Victoria. I'll have the paperwork ready by Monday." As they left the office, Daniel caught Victoria's hand briefly, squeezing once before letting go in the corporate hallway. Such a small gesture. But Victoria felt it reverberate through her entire body, the simple intimacy of being touched, of being chosen, of no longer being alone in her careful navigation of the world. "Dinner tonight?" Daniel asked quietly as they walked toward the elevators. "There's a Thai place near my house. Nothing fancy, but Lily loves their spring rolls." Victoria's heart stuttered. "With Lily? Too soon?" Daniel's eyes were understanding. "We can wait." "No." Victoria made the decision quickly, before fear could talk her out of it. "No, I want to meet her. Properly, I mean, not just in passing at the company picnic." "She's 7, Daniel warned, "which means she has no filter and will probably ask you extremely personal questions within 5 minutes of meeting you." "I run a company," Victoria said dryly. "I think I can handle one 7-year-old. Daniel's laugh was warm. "We'll see about that." Victoria changed outfits 4 times before settling on dark jeans and a cashmere sweater. Casual enough not to seem like she was trying too hard, nice enough to show she cared. She stared at herself in the mirror of her empty apartment and wondered what she was doing. This was Daniel's daughter, the most important person in his life. If Lily didn't like her, if Victoria couldn't connect with this child, the entire fragile possibility crumbled before it began. The Thai restaurant was small and cheerful, strung with paper lanterns and smelling of lemongrass and chili. Daniel and Lily were already there, sitting at a corner booth. Victoria saw them before they saw her, Daniel helping Lily color on the kids' menu, their heads bent together in concentration, and something in her chest ached with the intimacy of it. This was what family looked like. This easy affection, this unselfconscious closeness. Victoria had no template for it. Her own childhood had been cold and lonely, her parents' marriage a corporate merger that produced one child before dissolving into bitter divorce. She'd built her empire alone, celebrated her victories alone, survived cancer alone. Could she really fit into this warm, complicated picture? Then Lily looked up and saw her. The child's face lit up with recognition. They'd met briefly at the company picnic 6 months ago, when Victoria had complimented Lily's butterfly costume. "Dad, she came!" Lily bounced in her seat. "You said she might be busy." "I said she might be," Daniel corrected, but he was smiling as Victoria approached the table. Not that she would be. "Hi, Lily." Victoria slid into the booth across from them, her pulse racing. "Your dad tells me you're an expert on spring rolls." "I am," Lily announced proudly. "I can eat 6 of them, but Dad says I have to eat actual dinner too, which is unfair because spring rolls are dinner." "That does seem unfair," Victoria agreed solemnly, and was rewarded with a conspirator's grin. Dinner should have been awkward. The CEO, the employee, and the 7-year-old navigating the strange territory of whatever this was becoming. But Lily made awkwardness impossible. She talked non-stop about her school day, her best friend Maya, who had 2 moms and a baby brother, the butterfly sanctuary she wanted to visit for her birthday, the solar system project that still sat on their kitchen table even though it was due last week. "Dad helped me," she confided to Victoria. "But I did all the painting. Saturn is my favorite because of the rings. Do you have a favorite planet?" "I think Neptune," Victoria said, surprising herself. "It's blue and mysterious and far away from everything." "Like you," Lily said brightly, and Daniel nearly choked on his water. "Lily," he started, but Victoria was laughing. "Like me how?" she asked the child. "You're far away," Lily explained with perfect 7-year-old logic. "Way up in your big office. Maya's mom works in your building, and she says your office is on the highest floor. That's far away. And you seem mysterious. You don't talk much at the company picnics." "I'm not very good at picnics," Victoria admitted. "Or small talk, or being around lots of people." "Me neither sometimes," Lily said sympathetically. "That's why I like butterflies. They're pretty, but they don't expect you to talk to them." Victoria felt something shift in her chest. This child was Daniel's in all the ways that mattered. His kindness, his perception, his ability to see past surfaces to the truth underneath. "Can I ask you a question?" Lily said, and Daniel tensed beside her. "Lily, remember what we talked about?" "It's fine," Victoria interrupted, curious. "You can ask me anything." "Why don't you have kids?" Lily asked bluntly. "Dad said you're really smart and really nice. So why don't you have kids?" The restaurant seemed to go very quiet. Daniel's hand found Victoria's under the table, squeezing gently, offering her an exit from the conversation if she needed it. But Victoria looked at this perceptive, honest child and decided that Lily deserved honesty in return. "I wanted them," she said quietly. "But sometimes our bodies don't work the way we want them to. I got very sick when I was younger, and the medicine that made me better also made it so I couldn't have babies." Lily absorbed this information seriously. "That's sad." "Sometimes it is," Victoria agreed. "But I'm healthy now, which is the important part." "My mom died," Lily said matter-of-factly. "I was 4. I don't remember her very much, which makes Dad sad sometimes. He tries not to be sad around me, but I can tell." Victoria's throat closed. She looked at Daniel, saw the grief written clearly in his eyes even 3 years later, and understood something profound about the man sitting beside her. He'd been surviving too, just like her. Putting one foot in front of the other, showing up for his daughter, building a life from the wreckage of loss. "I think it's okay to be sad," Victoria said to Lily. "Even if it's been a long time, some things we never stop missing." "Do you miss having babies?" Lily asked with the directness only children possessed. "Sometimes," Victoria admitted, "but missing something doesn't mean life stops. It just means life looks different than we planned." Lily nodded slowly, processing. "Means extra help with homework, and extra means extra help with homework, and extra bedtime stories. Extra is good." Daniel was very still beside Victoria, barely breathing. "I don't know if I'd be very good at homework help," Victoria said carefully, her heart hammering. "I run a company, which means I work a lot, sometimes too much." Dad works a lot too," Lily said pragmatically. "But he still has time for me. Maybe you could have time for me too, if you wanted?" Victoria looked at this small, brave child who'd lost her mother and was offering trust anyway, and felt something crack open inside her that had been sealed shut for a decade. "I would like that," she whispered. "If it's okay with your dad." "It's okay with me," Daniel said roughly, his hand tightening around Victoria's under the table. "It's very okay with me." Lily beamed. "Good. Then you can come to the butterfly sanctuary for my birthday. It's in 3 weeks. Dad says we can go on Saturday, and I can invite whoever I want. I'm inviting Maya and her moms, and Aunt Rachel and the cousins, and now you." "I would be honored," Victoria said, and meant it completely. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of spring rolls and pad thai, and Lily's elaborate explanation of butterfly metamorphosis. By the time they left the restaurant, the Chicago night had turned cold, wind whipping off the lake and cutting through Victoria's cashmere sweater. Without thinking, Daniel shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, the gesture so casual and protective that Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. This was what it felt like to be chosen, not in grand declarations or expensive gestures, but in small moments of care that said, "I see you and you matter." "Thank you for dinner," she said as they reached her car. "Thank you for coming." Daniel's hand found the small of her back, a touch that sent warmth through her entire body. "Lily liked you." "She's extraordinary." Victoria glanced back at the restaurant, where Lily was visible through the window, coloring while they waited for their to-go boxes. "You've raised an incredible human, Daniel." "We're still figuring it out," Daniel admitted. "Some days are harder than others." "But she's resilient, braver than I am most days." "I don't think that's true." Victoria touched his face gently, allowing herself the intimacy now that they'd crossed this threshold together. "You've survived something impossible and kept showing up for her. That's not bravery. That's heroism." Daniel caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Says the woman who survived cancer and built an empire." "Survival isn't the same as heroism." "Isn't it?" Daniel's eyes were serious. "You could have let it break you, Victoria, the cancer, the abandonment, the loneliness, but you didn't. You built something meaningful instead. That's heroism in my book." Victoria kissed him there on the sidewalk, not caring who might see, not caring about optics or perception or anything except the feeling of his mouth on hers and his arms around her and the possibility that maybe, finally, she didn't have to be alone anymore. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel's eyes were bright. "Stay," he said quietly. I'm not asking for anything except your company. But Lily's with my sister tonight. I was going to go home to an empty house and pretend to watch television while actually just existing in silence. And I don't want to. Not tonight." Victoria's heart raced. They'd agreed to take things slow, to be responsible, to navigate the complications carefully. But something about this invitation felt right. Not rushed, but inevitable. "My place," she heard herself say. "It's closer. And I make terrible coffee, but excellent hot chocolate." Daniel's smile was like sunrise. Hot chocolate sounds perfect. Victoria's penthouse apartment was exactly what Daniel expected. Sleek, expensive, and utterly impersonal. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of Lake Michigan. Furniture that looked like it came from design magazines nobody actually read. Art on the walls that was clearly valuable but coldly abstract. Everything perfect and pristine and completely devoid of life. "It's awful, isn't it?" Victoria said softly, reading his expression as she took his coat. "I've lived here for 6 years and it still looks like a hotel." "It's not awful," Daniel said diplomatically. "It's just sterile, I know." Victoria moved into the kitchen, pulling out mugs and cocoa powder. "I keep meaning to make it more, personal, but I don't know how. My childhood home was like this, too. My mother believed in presentation over comfort. I think I absorbed that. Daniel watched her move around the kitchen, this powerful woman suddenly uncertain in her own space, and felt a wave of tenderness so strong it almost knocked him over. "What would you change?" he asked. "If you could make it feel like home?" Victoria paused, considering. "Plants, maybe? Photos? Books that aren't organized by color. A couch that's actually comfortable instead of architecturally significant." She laughed quietly. "Lily's butterfly drawings on the fridge. Evidence that people live here instead of just sleeping here between board meetings." We can do that, Daniel said. All of that, if you want. We? We. Daniel moved closer, taking the mug she offered. You're not alone anymore, Victoria, which means making your home actually feel like home isn't a solo project. They settled on the uncomfortable but architecturally significant couch, and Daniel noticed the way Victoria curled into his side automatically, as if her body had been waiting for permission to seek comfort. Tell me about Sarah, Victoria said quietly. If you want to. You know my ex-fiancé story. I'd like to know yours. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria started to apologize for overstepping, but he stopped her with a gentle hand on her knee. No, I want to tell you. I just don't talk about it much. People get uncomfortable. He took a breath. We met in college. She was studying environmental science. I was in business. Complete opposites in a lot of ways, but it worked. We got married young, 24, had Lily when we were 31. Life was good, normal. And then one day Sarah went to the doctor because she had a headache that wouldn't go away. Victoria's hand found his, threading their fingers together. Brain aneurysm, Daniel continued, his voice flat with old pain. They said it had probably been there for years, a ticking time bomb nobody knew about. She had surgery. Made it through. We thought the worst was over. And then 3 weeks later, while Lily was at my sister's and we were supposed to be celebrating Sarah's recovery with dinner out, she collapsed in the kitchen. Oh, Daniel, stroke, massive. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. Daniel's voice cracked. Lily was 4 years old. I had to tell my 4-year-old daughter that Mommy wasn't coming home. That the woman who sang her to sleep every night and knew every butterfly name and made up stories about fairies living in the backyard was just gone. Victoria pulled him closer, and Daniel let himself lean into her warmth, this woman who understood loss in ways most people never would. I was so angry, he admitted. At life, at fate, at every person who got to wake up next to their partner when mine was buried in the ground. I went through the motions for Lily, showed up at work, made lunches, read bedtime stories. But inside, I was screaming at the universe for being so arbitrarily cruel. How did you survive it? Victoria whispered. Lily. The answer was immediate. She needed me, so I survived. Simple as that. Some days that's still all it is. I survive because she needs me to. He looked at Victoria seriously. But I don't want to just survive anymore, Victoria. I want to live. And I think maybe you do too. I'm scared, Victoria admitted. What if I'm terrible at this? At being in your life, in Lily's life? What if I'm too damaged, too closed off? What if you're exactly what we need, Daniel countered. What if two people who've survived terrible things are exactly equipped to build something beautiful together? Victoria kissed him then, and the kiss deepened into something urgent and necessary. Two people who'd been alone too long discovering what it felt like to finally come home to someone who understood. When they eventually broke apart, both flushed and breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, Victoria whispered. I don't want to be alone. Neither do I, Daniel said. Neither do I. They fell asleep on Victoria's uncomfortable couch, wrapped around each other like survivors of a shipwreck clinging to the same piece of driftwood. And for the first time in years, neither of them was alone in the darkness. When Victoria woke at dawn, Daniel's arms were still around her, his breath warm against her hair. Outside, the city was beginning to stir. Inside, something new and fragile and impossibly brave was beginning to grow. She'd been chosen. After 42 years and 10 years of loneliness and a lifetime of believing she wasn't worth staying for, someone had chosen her, and she'd chosen him back. Whatever came next, complications, challenges, the messy reality of building a life together, they would face it as survivors who'd learned that the bravest thing you could do was choose to live instead of just survive. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a decade, Victoria Hale wasn't facing it alone. The first few weeks were a careful choreography of stolen moments and deliberate boundaries. At the office, Victoria and Daniel maintained professional distance, nodding in hallways, keeping meetings focused, never touching where cameras or curious eyes might see. But outside those glass walls, something tender and electric was growing between them, roots deepening with each shared dinner, each late-night phone call, each moment of choosing each other despite every reason not to. Victoria found herself leaving work at 6 instead of 9, a miracle her assistant Jennifer commented on with barely concealed shock. "Are you feeling all right?" Jennifer had asked the third time Victoria packed her briefcase before sunset. "Should I call Dr. Morrison?" "I'm fine," Victoria had replied, amused by the concern in her assistant's voice. "I just have plans." "Plans?" Jennifer's eyebrows had climbed toward her hairline. "You have plans that aren't board meetings or investor dinners?" "Personal plans," Victoria said, and the word felt foreign in her mouth. Personal. As if she were a person with a life beyond quarterly earnings and market projections. "I'm having dinner with someone." Jennifer's expression had shifted from concern to curiosity to something that looked suspiciously like hope. "Good," she'd said firmly. "It's about time." But now 3 weeks after that midnight confession in her office, Victoria stood in front of her bathroom mirror getting ready for Lily's 7th birthday celebration at the Butterfly Sanctuary. She'd changed outfits 4 times, finally settling on dark jeans and a soft green sweater that Daniel had once said brought out the gold in her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied mascara, and she had to force herself to breathe slowly. This was different from the casual dinners they'd shared. This was Lily's birthday. Daniel's sister Rachel would be there with her husband and 3 children. This was meeting the family, being introduced as what exactly? Her father's girlfriend felt too juvenile. Partner felt too formal. The woman he's dating while navigating company policy and emotional trauma felt too accurate to say aloud. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Lily's been dressed and ready for an hour. She's wearing butterfly antenna and asked if you'd like to borrow a pair. Fair warning." Victoria smiled despite her nerves. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd seen Lily twice more, once for pizza and a movie, once for an afternoon at the Science Museum where Lily had narrated every exhibit with enthusiastic detail. The child's energy was exhausting and wonderful, so different from Victoria's quiet, controlled world that sometimes she felt like an alien visitor trying to understand a foreign culture. But Lily made it easy. She asked direct questions, accepted direct answers, and never seemed bothered by Victoria's awkwardness around children. When Victoria had admitted she'd never read any of the children's books Lily referenced constantly, the girl had simply said, "That's okay, I can teach you," and proceeded to give a detailed summary of every important plot point in her favorite series. "I'll bring my own antenna," Victoria texted back, then added, "Tell her I'm excited to celebrate with her." The response came immediately. "She says you have to promise to look at every single butterfly. There are 73 species. I've been warned." Victoria laughed, the sound surprising in her silent apartment. 3 weeks ago, she would have spent Saturday morning reviewing reports and answering emails. Now she was planning to spend 4 hours looking at butterflies with a 7-year-old who'd somehow decided Victoria was worth including in her inner circle. The Butterfly Sanctuary was housed in an enormous conservatory on the edge of the city, glass domes rising like crystal bubbles against the November sky. Victoria arrived exactly on time, a habit she couldn't break even for social events, and found Daniel waiting near the entrance, Lily bouncing excitedly beside him. "You came!" Lily rushed forward, her butterfly antennae bobbing with each step. "I wasn't sure you'd really come." The admission hit Victoria harder than it should have. This child who'd lost her mother, who understood impermanence in ways 7-year-olds shouldn't have to, of course she wasn't sure adults would show up when they promised. Victoria knelt down to Lily's eye level, ignoring the cold concrete against her knees. "When I make a promise, I keep it," she said seriously. "I promised to be here, so I'm here, and I will always be here when I promise to be." Lily studied her face for a long moment, those perceptive eyes, so much like Daniel's, searching for truth. Then she nodded, satisfied, and grabbed Victoria's hand. "Good. Come on, Aunt Rachel's already inside, and the blue morphos are really active today. And there's a chrysalis that might hatch, and we can feed the butterflies if we're very gentle." Daniel caught Victoria's eye over Lily's head, his expression somewhere between apologetic and amused. "I tried to tell her you'd need a minute to catch your breath." "I don't mind," Victoria said, and realized it was true. Lily's enthusiasm was like standing in sunlight after years in shadow, overwhelming at first, but warming something that had been cold too long. Inside the sanctuary, the air was thick and humid, heavy with the scent of tropical flowers and damp earth. Butterflies floated through the air like living jewels, brilliant blues and oranges and greens, patterns so intricate they seemed painted by artists rather than evolved by nature. Lily dragged Victoria from exhibit to exhibit, narrating facts about each species with the confidence of a seasoned biologist. See that one? That's a glass-winged butterfly. You can see right through its wings because they don't have the colored scales like other butterflies. And that one's a monarch. They migrate thousands of miles every year, which is really far for something so small. Dad says it's like us walking from here to another country. And that one, Lily, breathe, Daniel said gently, his hand finding the small of Victoria's back in a touch too brief for anyone else to notice, but that sent warmth radiating through her entire body. Give Victoria a chance to actually look at them. It's fine, Victoria assured him, watching a brilliant blue butterfly land on Lily's outstretched finger. I'm learning more than I ever did in biology class. That's because school makes butterflies boring, Lily said matter-of-factly. They talk about metamorphosis, but they don't talk about how brave it is. The caterpillar has to completely dissolve inside the chrysalis. It becomes soup. Everything it was just melts. And then it has to rebuild itself into something totally different. That's scary, don't you think? Victoria felt the metaphor settle into her bones like a benediction. Very scary, she agreed quietly, but also very brave. Exactly, Lily beamed. Mom used to say that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the thing even though you're scared. I think butterflies are the bravest. Daniel had gone very still beside Victoria. She glanced at him and saw grief written plainly across his features, the mention of his late wife still capable of stealing his breath even 3 years later. Your mom sounds like she was very wise, Victoria said to Lily, giving Daniel a moment to collect himself. She was. Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, but her small hand tightened around Victoria's. I don't remember a lot about her, just pieces. The way she smelled, like lavender and something sweet, how she sang off-key, the butterfly garden she planted in our backyard. She looked up at Victoria seriously. Dad says it's okay that I don't remember everything. He says memory doesn't make love less real. Victoria's throat closed around words she couldn't speak. She looked at Daniel, saw him struggling with the same overwhelming emotion, and made a decision. I think your dad is right, she said carefully. And I think your mom would be very proud of the person you're becoming. Someone who knows butterfly facts and keeps her promises and understands that being brave means doing scary things anyway. Lily studied her for another of those long, assessing moments that seemed too old for her age. Do you think she'd like you? The question landed like a stone in still water. Victoria heard Daniel's sharp intake of breath, saw him start to intervene, but she stopped him with a small shake of her head. I don't know, she told Lily honestly. I hope so. But either way, I promise I'm not trying to replace her. I could never replace your mom. I'm just trying to be someone who cares about you and your dad. If that's okay? Lily nodded slowly. It's okay. Dad's been alone a long time. I think he gets lonely even when I'm there. Adults need other adults sometimes. Maya's mom explained it to me. She said grown-ups need grown-up friends who understand grown-up things. Maya's mom is very smart, Victoria said, her heart hammering against her ribs. She is, Lily agreed. She said love isn't like pie. You don't get less when you share it. You just get more different kinds. I love Dad, and I love Aunt Rachel, and I love Maya, and that's all different, but all real. So maybe I can love you too, if we keep being friends. A different kind than I love Dad, but still real. Victoria had to look away, blinking hard against sudden tears. This child, this extraordinary, perceptive, brave child, was offering acceptance with an open hand, no conditions attached. I would like that, Victoria managed. Very much. Good. Lily tugged her forward toward another exhibit. Come on, I want to show you the chrysalis. The person at the desk said it might hatch today, and I don't want to miss it. As Lily pulled her deeper into the sanctuary, Victoria felt Daniel's hand slip into hers, their fingers intertwining. Thank you, he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. For what? For understanding, for not making promises you can't keep, for being exactly what she needs. I don't know what I'm doing, Victoria admitted quietly, watching Lily press her nose against the glass of an enclosure housing several chrysalises in various stages of development. I've never been around children. I'm terrified I'm going to say the wrong thing or disappoint her or... Victoria. Daniel turned her to face him, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. You're showing up. You're being honest. That's all she needs. That's all either of us need. Before Victoria could respond, a voice called out across the sanctuary. Danny, there you are! A woman in her early 40s approached, 3 children trailing behind her like ducklings. She had Daniel's eyes and his warm smile, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. This had to be Rachel, Daniel's sister, the one who watched Lily on Tuesday and Thursday nights, who'd held Daniel together when Sarah died. Rachel. Daniel's hand found Victoria's again, a silent message of solidarity. This is Victoria. Victoria, my sister Rachel, her husband Marcus, and the Chaos crew, Sophie, James, and little Emma. Rachel's gaze moved from their joined hands to Victoria's face, assessment and curiosity warring in her expression. The Victoria? Lily's been talking about you nonstop for 3 weeks. All good things, I hope, Victoria said, her CEO voice activating automatically, polished, professional, designed to put people at ease while maintaining distance. But Rachel just laughed. Relax. I'm not going to grill you about your intentions toward my baby brother. Much. She glanced at Daniel with obvious affection. Though I will say it's about damn time he brought someone to a family event. Rachel, Daniel started, but his sister waved him off. 3 years, Danny. 3 years of watching you go through the motions while pretending you're fine. So yeah, I'm glad you finally let yourself have this. She looked at Victoria directly. Whatever this is, it's new, Victoria said carefully. We're taking it slow. Being responsible. Responsible is good. Rachel's smile turned mischievous. But don't take it too slow. Life's short. Trust me, I've seen how short it can be. The reference to Sarah's death hung in the air for a moment before Rachel deliberately lightened the mood, calling out to Lily and her cousins to explore the sanctuary together. As the children scattered like butterflies themselves, Rachel fell into step beside Victoria. Can I be honest with you? She asked quietly. Please. I've been worried about Danny. He's a good father. Amazing, actually. But he's forgotten how to be anything except Lily's dad. He stopped being Daniel, stopped having dreams that weren't about her school schedule or her happiness. Rachel's voice was gentle but serious. Lily needs a father who's whole, not just functional. And Danny needs someone who reminds him that he's allowed to want things for himself. I'm not sure I'm the right person for that, Victoria admitted. I barely know how to want things for myself. Rachel's laugh was surprised and genuine. Then maybe you're exactly the right person. 2 people figuring it out together instead of one trying to fix the other. They walked in companionable silence for a moment, watching Daniel crouch down to help little Emma see a butterfly that had landed on a leaf just above her eye level. The tenderness in his movements, the patience in his voice, Victoria felt something shift in her chest watching him. He told me about your cancer, Rachel said quietly, and Victoria stiffened. Don't be mad at him. He needed someone to talk to, someone who wasn't you. He was terrified about saying the wrong thing or making you feel like a burden. I'm not a burden, Victoria said automatically. No, you're not. But survivors often feel like they are, don't they? Rachel's voice was knowing. My best friend had breast cancer 5 years ago, stage 3. She survived, but she lost her marriage in the process. Her husband couldn't handle the reality of it, the scars, the uncertainty, the medical appointments. My ex-fiancé left too, Victoria said, the admission easier now than it had been 3 weeks ago. Said he signed up for a partner, not a patient. What an absolute bastard. Rachel's vehemence was satisfying. Danny's not like that. When Sarah got sick, he never left her side. He'd have moved mountains to save her if he could. The fact that he couldn't, that still haunts him. I know, Victoria said softly. I can see it in him sometimes. The guilt of surviving when she didn't. Rachel nodded. He feels guilty for being happy again, like moving forward means leaving Sarah behind. So if he hesitates sometimes, if he pulls back when things get too good, that's why. It's not about you, it's about him learning that it's okay to live again. The honesty in Rachel's words settled like a weight between them. Thank you, Victoria said, for telling me. Thank you for being patient with him, and for being good to Lily. That kid has been through enough loss. She doesn't need another person disappearing from her life. I'm not going anywhere, Victoria said, and felt the truth of it resonate through her entire body. 3 weeks ago, she couldn't have made that promise. But watching Daniel with his daughter, seeing the way Lily's face lit up when she explained butterfly metamorphosis, feeling Rachel's protective love for her brother, Victoria understood that she'd already made a choice. She was in this, all the way in. The chrysalis hatched an hour later, and Lily's shriek of excitement brought everyone running. They crowded around the enclosure, watching as a wet, crumpled butterfly emerged from its prison, wings slowly unfurling as fluid pumped through delicate veins. It was messy and vulnerable and utterly miraculous. "See?" Lily whispered, her face pressed against the glass. "It was soup, and now it's flying. That's the bravest thing in the world." Victoria felt Daniel's hand slip into hers again, his thumb tracing gentle circles against her palm. She thought about metamorphosis, about dissolving into something formless and terrifying before rebuilding into something capable of flight. Thought about how she'd spent the past decade hardened into protective armor, convinced that survival meant staying exactly as she was, controlled, distant, impenetrable. But maybe survival was actually the opposite. Maybe it was allowing yourself to dissolve, to become vulnerable, to rebuild into something that could fly instead of just endure. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Daniel said to Lily, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "What do you think? Worth the wait?" "Definitely." Lily turned to Victoria with shining eyes. "Did you see it? Did you see how brave it was?" "I saw," Victoria said softly. "The bravest thing I've ever seen." They stayed until the sanctuary closed, Lily narrating every species they encountered with tireless enthusiasm. By the time they left, Victoria's feet hurt from walking and her head buzzed with butterfly facts, and her heart felt fuller than it had in a decade. In the parking lot, Rachel pulled her aside one more time. "Danny's cancer screening is in 2 weeks," she said quietly. "He probably hasn't told you." Victoria's heart stopped. "What?" "Routine physical, but given Sarah's aneurysm, the doctors want to be thorough. Make sure there's nothing hereditary lurking." Rachel's expression was serious. "He'll downplay it, say it's nothing, but he's terrified every time. Always has been since Sarah died. The idea that something could be wrong, and he wouldn't know until it's too late. It haunts him." "Why are you telling me this?" Victoria asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because he needs someone who understands medical fear. Someone who knows what it's like to sit in those waiting rooms wondering if today's the day they find something." Rachel squeezed Victoria's hand gently. "You've lived that fear. He needs someone who won't minimize it or tell him he's overreacting. He needs someone who just gets it." Victoria nodded slowly, her mind already calculating dates and schedules. "When is it?" "November 18th, Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. "I'll be there," Victoria said immediately. "If he wants me there." "He'll want you there," Rachel said with certainty. "Even if he doesn't know how to ask." That night, after Lily had been dropped off at Rachel's house for a sleepover with her cousins, Daniel and Victoria sat in his car in the parking lot of her building. Neither of them moved to get out. "Thank you for today," Daniel said finally. "I know it was a lot. My sister interrogating you, 4 children's worth of chaos, 3 hours of butterfly facts." "I loved it," Victoria interrupted and realized she meant it. "Lily is extraordinary. Your sister is wonderful. The butterflies were beautiful. I loved all of it." Daniel turned to look at her, his eyes searching her face in the dim light from the street lamps. "Rachel told you about my screening, didn't she?" Victoria saw no point in lying. "She did." "I was going to tell you, He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "It's probably nothing, just routine. I didn't want to make it into a big deal." "Daniel." Victoria took his hand, threading their fingers together. "I have a screening in 1 week, November 11th. I was terrified to tell you because I didn't want you to think I was being dramatic about routine medical appointments. But the truth is, every single one terrifies me. Every 6 months for the past 10 years, I walk into that clinic convinced they're going to find something." Daniel's grip tightened on her hand. "You didn't tell me." "I was afraid you'd think I was broken, too damaged, too much work." Now, the confession hurt coming out, but Victoria forced herself to continue. "Every man I've dated since my diagnosis, the few I let get close, They all eventually decided that the medical appointments and the scans and the constant specter of recurrence was too much to deal with. "I'm not them," Daniel said fiercely. "Victoria, He took a breath. "When Sarah collapsed, I was completely helpless. I couldn't save her. Couldn't even say goodbye. One minute she was laughing about something stupid. The next she was on the floor, and no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, she was gone. I've lived every day since terrified that something will happen to Lily or to me, and I won't see it coming." Victoria's throat ached with unshed tears. "I know that fear. I live it too." "Then you understand why I haven't told you about my screening. Why the idea of admitting I'm scared feels like admitting weakness." It's not weakness," Victoria said firmly. "It's being human. It's having survived something that taught you exactly how fragile life is." Daniel pulled her closer, and Victoria went willingly, letting herself be held in the quiet car while the city moved around them. This was intimacy, she realized, not just physical connection, but emotional nakedness, the willingness to admit fear to someone who understood fear, the courage to be vulnerable with someone who knew exactly how much vulnerability cost. "Come to my appointment with me," she whispered against his shoulder, "and I'll come to yours. We face the fear together instead of alone." Daniel's arms tightened around her. "Together," he agreed roughly. "No more alone." They sat like that for a long time, two survivors holding each other in the darkness, learning what it felt like to share the weight instead of carrying it alone. When Victoria finally pulled back, Daniel's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Stay tonight," he said quietly. "Lily's at Rachel's until tomorrow afternoon. Stay with me. I don't want to be alone in that house tonight." Victoria understood what he was really saying. The house he'd shared with Sarah. The rooms full of memories. The bed where he still sometimes reached for a ghost in the darkness. "Okay," she said simply. "Okay." Daniel's house was nothing like Victoria's sterile penthouse. It was warm and cluttered and obviously lived in, shoes by the door, Lily's backpack dumped in the entryway, photos covering every available surface. Victoria saw Sarah everywhere, in the framed pictures on the walls, in the feminine touches that Daniel clearly hadn't changed, in the ghost of the life that had existed here before tragedy struck. "I keep meaning to update things," Daniel said, reading her expression as he hung up their coats. "But Lily likes having pictures of her mom around, and I don't know. It feels wrong to erase her completely." "You shouldn't erase her," Victoria said firmly. "She was Lily's mother, your wife. She deserves to be remembered." Daniel looked at her with something like wonder. "Most people find it weird that I haven't moved all her pictures to albums or changed the decor. Most people are idiots." Victoria moved to one of the photos, a candid shot of Sarah laughing, her head thrown back in unrestrained joy. She was beautiful. She was. Daniel came to stand beside her. And complicated and brilliant and sometimes incredibly frustrating. She sang off key constantly, could never remember where she put her keys, cried at insurance commercials. She made the best chocolate chip cookies I've ever tasted and absolutely refused to follow recipes, just threw ingredients together and somehow made magic. Victoria heard the love in his voice, threaded through with grief that time had softened but not erased. "Tell me about her," she said impulsively. "Tell me everything. I want to know the woman who raised Lily, who loved you, who made this house a home." So Daniel told her. They curled up on his couch, worn and comfortable in ways Victoria's architecturally significant furniture could never be. And he talked for hours. About meeting Sarah in a college biology class. About their wedding in a botanical garden. About Lily's birth and Sarah's terror and joy at becoming a mother. About the butterfly garden Sarah had planted, explaining that butterflies needed both sun and shade, sweetness and sustenance. About her final weeks, the surgery, the hope, the devastating suddenness of her death. Victoria listened and asked questions and understood that loving Daniel meant making space for Sarah's memory, not competing with a ghost, but honoring the woman who'd shaped the man beside her. "Thank you," Daniel said finally, when the stories had run their course and the house was quiet around them. "For listening, for not being threatened by her." "How could I be threatened by someone who loved you first?" Victoria asked softly. "Who gave you Lily? Who taught you what partnership looks like?" She took his face in her hands, making him meet her eyes. I'm not trying to replace her, Daniel. I'm just trying to be the next chapter, if you'll let me. Daniel kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise. When they finally made their way upstairs to his bedroom, Victoria understood that this was sacred ground. The bed he'd shared with Sarah, the room where they'd whispered secrets and made plans and built a life. "Are you sure?" she asked at the threshold. "We don't have to." "I'm sure," Daniel said. "Sarah wouldn't want me frozen in the past. She'd want me to live, to be happy, to let someone in." He smiled sadly. "She'd probably like you, actually. You both have that fierce competence thing, the way you approach problems like battle plans." They made love carefully, tenderly, two people learning each other's scars and vulnerabilities. Victoria traced the tension in Daniel's shoulders, the weight of 3 years of single parenthood written in his body. Daniel explored her mastectomy scar with gentle reverence, kissing the place where cancer had taken flesh but not spirit. Afterward, wrapped in sheets that smelled like laundry detergent and Daniel's cologne, Victoria felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or possibility. The understanding that healing didn't mean forgetting, it meant having the courage to build something new without erasing what came before. "I love you," Daniel whispered into the darkness. "I know it's fast and probably crazy and definitely complicated, but I love you, Victoria Hale." Victoria's breath caught. No one had said those words to her in 10 years. Not since Marcus had walked away, taking his love with him like a retracted offer. "I love you too," she whispered back, and felt the truth of it bloom through her entire body. "I'm terrified, and it's definitely too fast and absolutely complicated, but I love you." Daniel pulled her closer, and they fell asleep tangled together, two survivors who'd spent years in darkness finally allowing themselves to reach for light. Victoria's screening fell on a Tuesday that dawned cold and gray, Lake Michigan churning under slate-colored skies that matched the knot of dread in her stomach. She'd been through this routine 20 times in the past decade. The early morning appointment, the sterile waiting room, the careful neutrality of the technicians who couldn't tell you anything even if they wanted to. But this time, when she walked through the doors of Northwestern Memorial's Oncology Center, Daniel was beside her. He'd taken the morning off work without question, had picked her up at 7:30 with coffee and a bagel she couldn't eat, had held her hand in the car while carefully not asking if she was okay. Because they both knew she wasn't okay. Nobody facing their cancer screening was okay, no matter how many years of remission stretched behind them. "You don't have to stay," Victoria said for the third time as they checked in at the reception desk. "The mammogram takes 20 minutes, then there's usually an hour wait for the ultrasound if they see anything concerning. It's boring and uncomfortable and—" "I'm staying," Daniel said simply. His hand found the small of her back, a touch that grounded her when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. "I told you, Victoria. No more alone." The waiting room was painted in shades of mauve and cream, decorated with abstract art that was probably meant to be soothing, but just made Victoria think of bruises. She'd sat in this exact room 20 times before, always alone, always fighting the urge to flee. The other women scattered throughout the space had the same tight expressions, the same way of holding themselves carefully still, as if movement might shatter whatever composure they'd managed to construct. Daniel settled into the chair beside her, his presence both comforting and terrifying. What if they found something? What if after 10 years of clear scans, today was the day the monster came back? She'd survived it once alone. Could she survive it again with someone watching, with someone who might decide the reality of recurrence was too much to handle? "Stop," Daniel murmured, reading her expression with the accuracy of someone who'd spent weeks learning her tells. "Whatever spiral you're going down, stop. We don't know anything yet." "I know that every woman in this room is doing the same math I am," Victoria said quietly. "Calculating odds, remembering statistics, wondering if today's the day their luck runs out." "Then we wait together," Daniel said, "and whatever they find, we handle it together." A nurse called Victoria's name before she could respond. She stood on legs that felt unsteady, and Daniel stood with her. "I'll be right here," he promised, his eyes serious. "However long it takes." The mammogram was its usual exercise in uncomfortable vulnerability, standing half naked while a machine compressed breast tissue between cold plates, trying not to think about what the images might reveal. The technician was professionally cheerful, making small talk about the weather while positioning Victoria's body with impersonal efficiency. "Any changes since your last screening?" she asked, typing notes into her computer. "New lumps? Pain? Discharge?" "No," Victoria said, her voice flat. "Nothing." "Good. And you're still doing monthly self-exams?" "Yes." "Excellent. Okay, this will be uncomfortable, but try to hold still." Uncomfortable was an understatement. Victoria focused on breathing through the compression, on not thinking about the fact that somewhere in this building, radiologists would examine these images and decide her fate for the next 6 months. When it was finally over, the technician smiled brightly. "All done. The doctor will review these and let you know if we need any additional imaging. You can get dressed and wait in the consultation room down the hall." Victoria had learned long ago that additional imaging was code for "we saw something concerning." Her hands trembled as she dressed, fumbling with her bra clasp twice before getting it fastened. In the mirror, her face was pale, her eyes too large, her expression stripped of the confident CEO mask she wore everywhere else. This was who she really was underneath the suits and the authority. A woman still terrified of her own mortality, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Daniel was exactly where she'd left him, reading something on his phone, but clearly not absorbing any of it. When he saw her, he stood immediately. "How are you?" "Fine," Victoria said automatically. Then, because she'd promised herself honesty with this man, "Terrified. They won't tell me anything until the radiologist reviews the images. Could be 10 minutes, could be 2 hours. Then we wait," Daniel said. He took her hand and led her to the consultation room, a smaller space with 2 chairs and a desk, and windows overlooking the city. "Tell me something." "About what?" "Anything. Something that has nothing to do with this appointment or cancer or waiting." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Tell me about the first company you ever wanted to start, before Hale Innovations." Victoria blinked, thrown by the question. "Why?" "Because I want to know you, all of you, not just the CEO or the survivor. I want to know the dreams you had before life got complicated." Something in Victoria's chest loosened slightly. She settled into the chair beside him, their joined hands resting between them. "I wanted to open a bookstore," she admitted. "When I was 16, I worked at this little independent shop in my neighborhood. The owner was this fierce woman named Margaret, who read everything and had opinions about all of it. She taught me that books could be medicine, that the right story at the right time could save someone's life." "What happened?" Daniel asked softly. "My father told me bookstores were dying businesses, that I'd never make money, never build anything sustainable. He said I was smart enough to do something that mattered." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "So I went to business school, got my MBA, started Hale Innovations because I could build something that would prove I mattered, that I was worth something." "You always mattered," Daniel said fiercely, "with or without the company, with or without proving anything to anyone." Before Victoria could respond, there was a knock on the door. Dr. Sarah Patel entered, tablet in hand, her expression carefully neutral in the way that made Victoria's heart drop into her stomach. "Victoria," Dr. Patel said warmly. "Good to see you. And this must be Daniel. Your chart mentioned you'd have someone with you today." "Is something wrong?" Victoria asked immediately, bypassing pleasantries. "Did you find something?" Dr. Patel's expression softened. "Your scans are clear, Victoria. No masses, no calcifications, no areas of concern. You're still in remission." The words took a moment to penetrate. Victoria felt Daniel's hand tighten around hers, felt the shuddering breath he released, but her own body seemed frozen in the moment before relief could register. "Clear?" she repeated. "You're sure?" "Completely sure." Dr. Patel pulled up the images on her tablet, showing Victoria the scans she'd learned to read over the past decade. "See? Clean tissue, no abnormalities. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Victoria felt something crack open inside her chest, not the breaking kind of crack, but the kind that let light in. 10 years. 10 years of 6-month intervals, 20 screenings, and every single time the relief felt brand new. The certainty that this time would be the time the cancer returned, shattered once again by the simple mercy of clear scans. "Thank you," she managed, her voice unsteady. "Thank you." "I'll see you in 6 months," Dr. Patel said kindly. "But, Victoria, you look happier than I've seen you in years. Whatever else you're doing besides staying healthy, That's good too. Keep that up as well. When the door closed behind the doctor, Victoria turned to Daniel and found him watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. "You're okay," he said, and his voice broke on the words. "You're okay." Then she was crying, and he was pulling her into his arms, and all the fear she'd been holding at bay for weeks came pouring out in great, shuddering sobs that she muffled against his shoulder. Daniel held her through it, his hand stroking her hair, his voice murmuring reassurances she couldn't quite hear over the roaring in her ears. "I'm sorry," she gasped when she could finally breathe again. I never—" "Don't apologize," Daniel said roughly. "Don't you dare apologize for being human, for being scared, for feeling relief." Victoria pulled back enough to see his face and found his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I've done this alone 20 times, she whispered. "Every time I walked out of this building by myself and went back to work and pretended I was fine. But I was never fine, Daniel. I was always terrified." "You're not alone anymore," he said, framing her face with his hands. "You hear me, Victoria? You're not alone. Not in this, not in anything." They sat like that for a long moment, foreheads pressed together, breathing each other's air. Finally, Victoria managed a shaky laugh. "Your screening is in 1 week. Now I understand why Rachel told me you'd need someone there." Daniel's expression shuddered slightly. "It's different. I don't have a history like you do." "No, but you have Sarah's death. You have the fear of something being wrong and not knowing until it's too late." Victoria took his face in her hands the way he'd done for her. "I'll be there, Daniel. However scared you are, whatever you need, I'll be there." His kiss tasted like salt and relief and promise. When they finally left the hospital, walking out into the cold November morning, Victoria felt lighter than she had in years. Clear scans, 6 more months of breathing room, and someone beside her who understood exactly what those 6 months meant. They went to breakfast at a diner near the hospital, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that could strip paint. Victoria ordered pancakes she actually wanted to eat, amazed by the simple pleasure of appetite unburdened by fear. "I want to tell you something," she said as Daniel drowned his eggs in hot sauce. "About why I built the company." Daniel looked up, curious. "I thought it was to prove your worth to your father." "That was part of it," Victoria admitted. "But the real reason, after I finished chemo, after Marcus left, after I realized I was going to survive, but survival looked nothing like I'd planned. I was lost. I didn't know who I was without the future I'd imagined. Wife, mother, normal life. All of that was gone." She traced patterns in the condensation on her water glass, organizing her thoughts. "I started Hale Innovations because I needed to build something that mattered, something that would outlast me. I couldn't create children, couldn't build a family the traditional way, but I could create jobs. I could innovate. I could make a difference in ways that didn't require a functioning reproductive system." She laughed bitterly. "It sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud." "It doesn't," Daniel said quietly. "It sounds like someone who took unimaginable loss and turned it into purpose." "That's not ridiculous, Victoria. That's heroic." "I don't feel heroic. I feel like I've spent 10 years hiding in work because I was too scared to actually live." "And now?" Daniel's hand found hers across the table. "What do you feel now?" Victoria met his eyes and felt the truth settle into her bones. "Like maybe I'm ready to stop hiding, to build something that isn't just professional success, to let my life be about more than quarterly earnings and market share." "What would that look like?" Daniel asked. "If you could build any life you wanted?" The question was enormous, years of possibility opening up like a flower. Victoria thought about her sterile apartment, her empty evenings, the way she'd convinced herself that loneliness was the price of survival. "I want a home that feels lived in," she said slowly. "Photos on the walls, plants that I keep alive, maybe a cat." She smiled at Daniel's expression. "Lily mentioned wanting one, and I want people. I want family dinners and birthday celebrations and someone to tell about my day. I want to leave work at reasonable hours and not feel guilty about it. I want to matter to people, not just as a CEO, but as a person." "You already matter," Daniel said. "To me, to Lily, to Rachel, who grilled me for an hour after the butterfly sanctuary about my intentions toward you. Victoria laughed despite herself. And what did you tell her? That I'm in love with you, that I know it's fast and complicated and probably terrifying for both of us, but that I'm choosing you anyway, and I'm going to keep choosing you for as long as you'll let me. The waitress refilled their coffee, oblivious to the enormity of the moment she'd interrupted. When she left, Victoria leaned across the table and kissed Daniel softly. I'm choosing you too, she said against his mouth. Scars and all, dead wife's memory and all, single father complications and all. I'm choosing this, Daniel. I'm choosing us. The following week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Victoria tried to focus on work, a major investor presentation, final negotiations on the Harrison merger, the 1,000 details that running a billion-dollar company required. But her mind kept drifting to Daniel, to the screening appointment looming on Tuesday, to the fear she'd seen flickering in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. On Monday evening, she left the office at 5:30, a miracle that made Jennifer actually gasp aloud, and drove to Daniel's house. She'd texted ahead, asking if she could come over, and his response had been immediate. Please, Lily wants to show you something. What Lily wanted to show her was a drawing, carefully rendered in colored pencils, of 3 figures holding hands. One tall woman with dark hair, one tall man with brown hair, one small girl with pigtails. Behind them, butterflies filled the sky in impossible colors. It's us, Lily explained unnecessarily, her face glowing with pride. I made it in art class. Mrs. Henderson said it was very good, and she put it on the wall for parent night. Victoria's throat closed around words she couldn't speak. She knelt down to Lily's level, studying the drawing with the seriousness it deserved. It's beautiful, she managed finally. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why butterflies? Lily looked at her like the answer should be obvious. Because you're all butterflies. You and Dad both had to be soup before you could fly. And now you're flying together. That's what butterflies do. They transform. Victoria pulled the child into a hug before she could stop herself. This extraordinary 7-year-old who saw the world in metaphors and understood things adults spent years in therapy trying to process. Thank you, she whispered into Lily's hair. Thank you for including me in your picture. You're part of our family now, Lily said simply, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. Families include people they love. And I love you. Different than I love Dad, but still real. Remember? Victoria did remember. Love isn't like pie. More different kinds, all real. That night after Lily was asleep and they sat together on the couch that was becoming as familiar as Victoria's own furniture, Daniel stared at his hands. I'm terrified, he admitted quietly. About tomorrow. I know it's probably nothing. I'm healthy, I exercise, I don't have any symptoms. But the thought that they could find something, that I could leave Lily the way Sarah did? You won't, Victoria said fiercely. You're going to walk into that appointment, get your scans, and walk out with clean results. And I'm going to be beside you the entire time. You don't know that. Daniel's voice was raw. Sarah was healthy. She had no symptoms. And then one day she was gone, Victoria. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. How do I trust that won't happen again? Victoria understood that fear intimately. The arbitrary cruelty of life, the way disaster could strike without warning or mercy. She'd spent 10 years waiting for cancer to come back, convinced that the universe wouldn't let her keep this reprieve forever. You can't trust it, she said honestly. That's the terrible truth, Daniel. We can't control whether our bodies betray us. We can only control what we do with the time we have. She took his hand, threading their fingers together. Sarah didn't get a choice, but we do. We get to choose whether we spend our lives paralyzed by fear of what might happen, or whether we live fully in the moments we have. I don't know if I'm brave enough for that, Daniel whispered. Yes, you are. You're the bravest person I know. Victoria pulled him closer, wrapping her arms around him the way he'd done for her a week ago. You survived the worst thing that could happen. You raised Lily alone. You learned to live again after losing everything. That's not cowardice, Daniel. That's courage. They held each other in the quiet house while Lily slept upstairs, 2 people who'd learned exactly how fragile life was, trying to be brave enough to build something anyway. Tuesday morning arrived too quickly. Victoria picked Daniel up at 9, found him pale but composed, his jaw tight with tension he was trying to hide. They drove to the clinic in silence, their hands clasped between them, both lost in private terrors they couldn't quite articulate. The waiting room was different from Victoria's oncology center, general practice rather than specialized cancer care, but the fear in the air was the same. Daniel checked in with a nurse who smiled pleasantly and handed him a clipboard of forms he'd filled out 100 times before. "I know this is routine," he said as they settled into uncomfortable chairs. "I know the odds of them finding anything are minimal, but I can't stop thinking about Sarah, about how routine becomes catastrophic without warning." "I know," Victoria said quietly, "but you're not Sarah. You're you, and whatever happens today, we handle it together." The physical examination was quick and unremarkable. Victoria waited while Daniel went through the motions: blood pressure, heart rate, reflexes, all the standard measurements of a body functioning normally. Then came the blood draw for comprehensive panels, the EKG to check heart function, the careful questions about family history and lifestyle. The doctor was in his 50s, with kind eyes and the efficient manner of someone who delivered both good news and bad more times than he could count. "Everything looks good so far, Daniel," Dr. Martinez said, reviewing the chart. "Blood pressure normal, heart sounds clear, no concerning symptoms. Given your wife's history, I want to run the expanded cardiovascular panel and schedule you for a stress test, but I don't see anything alarming." "When will we know the results?" Daniel asked, and Victoria heard the tremor in his voice he was fighting to control. "Blood work takes about a week. We'll call with results. The stress test we can schedule for next month." Dr. Martinez's expression softened. "I know Sarah's death was traumatic, but you're doing everything right, staying active, managing stress, coming in for regular checkups. Try not to borrow trouble before we know there's trouble to borrow." They left with instructions for the stress test and a prescription for anxiety that Daniel crumpled and threw away the moment they reached the car. "I don't need pills," he said roughly. "I need—" His voice broke. "I need to know I'm not going to leave Lily. That's all I need." Victoria pulled him into her arms right there in the parking lot, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except the man falling apart in her embrace. "You're not leaving her," she said fiercely. "You're not leaving either of us. Do you hear me?" "You can't promise that," Daniel said against her shoulder. "Nobody can promise that." "Then I promise this," Victoria said. "Whatever time we have, a year, 10 years, 50 years, we live it fully. We don't waste it being afraid. We choose each other every single day and we build something worth having." Daniel pulled back enough to see her face, his eyes red-rimmed but clearing. "How did you do this alone for 10 years?" "I didn't do it alone," Victoria admitted. "I had work, I had the company. I poured everything into building something that would matter if I disappeared tomorrow." She cupped his face in her hands. "But I don't want to live like that anymore, Daniel. I don't want my legacy to be quarterly reports and market innovations. I want it to be this, us, the family we're building, the life we're choosing." "Even knowing it could all disappear?" Daniel asked. "Even knowing how much it will hurt if we lose each other?" "Especially knowing that," Victoria said, "because the alternative is living half a life out of fear. And we're both done with half lives, aren't we?" Daniel kissed her there in the parking lot with the November wind cutting through their coats and his hands shaking slightly and his eyes still bright with tears. But when they broke apart, he was smiling. "Okay," he said. "Okay. We live fully. We choose each other. We stop being afraid. We stop letting fear make our decisions," Victoria corrected gently. "I think we're always going to be a little afraid, but we do it anyway." They drove back to Victoria's apartment, neither wanting to separate, neither ready to face the rest of the day alone. Inside her sterile penthouse, Daniel looked around with fresh eyes. "This doesn't look like you anymore," he observed. "The woman I know wouldn't live in a space this cold." "Then help me change it," Victoria said impulsively. "Help me make it feel like home, like a place people actually live instead of just sleep between obligations." Daniel's smile was soft and understanding. "What did you have in mind?" "I have no idea," Victoria admitted. "I've never made a home before. My childhood house was a showplace. My apartment is a hotel. I don't know what home even looks like." "Then we figure it out together," Daniel said. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos until he found one of Lily's drawing. The 3 figures holding hands, butterflies filling the sky behind them. "We start with this. Frame it. Put it somewhere you'll see it every day." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. On the fridge. Lily said I should put her drawings on the fridge. Then we get a frame for the fridge, Daniel agreed. And we add plants and comfortable furniture and books you actually want to read instead of books that look impressive on shelves. They spent the afternoon planning small changes that felt enormous. A trip to a plant nursery, replacing the glass coffee table with something sturdy enough to put your feet on, moving Victoria's desk away from the window so the view didn't constantly pull her back to work. Daniel ordered takeout from the Thai place Lily loved, and they ate sitting on Victoria's uncomfortable couch, making plans for a home that would feel lived in. I want you to move in, Victoria said suddenly, the words escaping before she could second-guess them. You and Lily. I want this place to be our place. I want to wake up next to you every morning and help Lily with homework at the kitchen table and be a family, if that's something you'd want. Daniel went very still, his expression unreadable. Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs as she waited for his response, terrified she'd pushed too far, asked for too much too soon. Are you sure? He asked finally. It's a big step. Lily comes with a lot of chaos. Toys everywhere, noise, disrupted schedules. Your pristine apartment would never be pristine again. I don't want pristine, Victoria said fiercely. I want lived in. I want messy. I want evidence that people I love exist in my space. I'm sure, Daniel, if you are. My house, Daniel's voice was rough. It's Sarah's house. We bought it together, decorated it together. Leaving it feels like leaving her. Bring her with you, Victoria said immediately. Bring the photos, the memories, everything that matters. I'm not asking you to erase Sarah. I'm asking you to build something new while honoring what came before. Daniel's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Lily would love it, living in a building with a doorman and an elevator, being closer to her school, having more space for her butterfly collection. Is that a yes? Victoria asked, her heart in her throat. That's a yes, Daniel said, and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like promise and possibility, and the terrifying courage of choosing love despite knowing exactly how much love could cost. They spent the evening making lists and plans, deciding what furniture to keep, what to donate, how to blend two lives that had existed separately for so long. It was practical and mundane and utterly magical. The small details of building a life together, the negotiations about closet space and whose dishes to keep and whether they needed 2 sets of towels. When Daniel finally left to pick up Lily from Rachel's house, Victoria stood alone in her apartment and saw it with new eyes. Soon this space would be filled with Lily's laughter and Daniel's steady presence and all the beautiful chaos of family. Soon she wouldn't come home to silence and sterile surfaces. Soon she would come home to love. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Danny told me, I'm so happy I could cry. Also, I'm throwing you a housewarming party, whether you want one or not. Victoria smiled, typing back, only if you promise to keep it small. Rachel's response was immediate. I promise nothing. Welcome to the family, Victoria. Welcome to the family. 4 words that meant everything Victoria had thought cancer had stolen from her forever. 4 words that promised she didn't have to face her screenings alone or celebrate victories in silence or build empires to prove she mattered. She was chosen. She was loved. She was building a family, not through biology, but through the braver choice, opening her heart to people who'd already survived their own losses and were willing to risk loving again anyway. Outside, the Chicago skyline glittered in the darkness, the same view she'd stared at from her office the night Daniel had first said he would choose her. The view hadn't changed, but everything else had. She had transformed, dissolved like a caterpillar, and rebuilt into something capable of flight. And she was ready. Ready to stop surviving and start living. Ready to fill her home with love instead of silence. Ready to face whatever came next. Medical appointments and blended family challenges and all the ordinary terrors of building a life with people you loved. Because she finally understood that the terror was worth it. Love was worth it. Life was worth it. And she was done being afraid to reach for both. The crisis came 3 weeks later, on a Thursday evening when Victoria was supposed to be reviewing contract proposals, but was instead helping Lily build a diorama of the Amazon rainforest for her science class. They'd taken over the dining room table, construction paper and glue sticks and tiny plastic animals scattered across the expensive mahogany surface that had never been used for anything except signing important documents. Lily was narrating the ecosystem with her usual enthusiasm, explaining why poison dart frogs needed to be bright colors and how leafcutter ants could carry pieces 50 times their own weight, when Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his entire body went rigid. "It's my landlord," he said, his voice tight. "Give me a minute." Victoria watched him step onto the balcony, phone pressed to his ear, his shoulders tense in a way that made her stomach drop. Lily continued chattering about biodiversity, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, but Victoria's attention was entirely focused on Daniel's body language through the glass, the way his free hand came up to grip the back of his neck, the way he turned away from the city lights, as if the conversation required darkness. When he came back inside 5 minutes later, his face was pale. "What happened?" Victoria asked immediately, standing up from where she'd been gluing tiny trees to cardboard. "Gas leak," Daniel said flatly. "In my building. They're evacuating everyone until they can fix it. Could be days, could be weeks. They don't know yet." "You're staying here," Victoria said immediately. "Both of you. We've been planning the move anyway. This just accelerates the timeline." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, and Victoria saw real fear flicker across his features. "Victoria, we can't just—" "Yes, we can." Victoria moved to him, taking his face in her hands and making him look at her. "Daniel, we've been talking about this for weeks. You've already given notice on your lease. Most of your things are already packed. This isn't me rushing you into something you're not ready for. This is life giving us a push in the direction we were already going." "What about Lily's routine?" Daniel asked, and Victoria could hear the edge of panic in his voice. "She needs stability, consistency. I can't just uproot her. Dad, I want to live here," Lily interrupted from the table, looking up from her rainforest with matter-of-fact certainty. "I already told Maya we're moving to Victoria's building. It has an elevator and a doorman named Henry who gives out candy on Fridays. Plus, my school is closer from here, and Victoria said I could have the spare bedroom and paint it any color I want." Daniel looked between his daughter and Victoria, something cracking in his expression. "When did you two discuss this?" "Last week," Lily said. "When you were at work and Victoria took me to get ice cream. She said she wanted to make sure I was okay with everything before you moved in, that my feelings mattered because this is my family too." Victoria met Daniel's eyes and saw the moment he understood. She hadn't just invited him to move in. She'd made sure Lily felt included in the decision, that this 7-year-old who'd already lost so much had a voice in the changes happening around her. "You talked to her first," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "Before even telling me your final decision, you made sure Lily was okay with it." "Of course I did," Victoria said simply. "She's part of this family. Her opinion matters." Daniel pulled Victoria into his arms so suddenly it knocked the breath from her lungs, his face buried in her hair, his whole body trembling with something that felt like relief and terror and overwhelming gratitude all mixed together. "Thank you," he whispered against her temple. "Thank you for seeing her, for understanding that she comes first." "She always comes first," Victoria said firmly. "And right now, what comes first is getting both of you settled here safely while your building deals with the gas leak. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Rachel and ask her to help you pack up whatever essentials you need tonight. Tomorrow, we'll arrange for movers to get the rest. And Lily is going to finish her rainforest diorama because it's due Monday and poison dart frogs wait for no one." Lily giggled at that, and even Daniel managed a shaky laugh. "You're terrifying when you go into CEO mode." "Years of practice," Victoria said. She kissed him softly. "Go call your sister. I've got rainforest duty." The next few hours were controlled chaos. Rachel arrived with her husband Marcus and a determination to get my baby brother moved properly, which apparently meant a full-scale operation involving color-coded boxes and detailed inventory lists. They descended on Daniel's house like a well-organized army, packing clothes and books and Lily's extensive butterfly collection with military precision. Victoria stayed at the apartment with Lily, clearing out the spare bedroom that had served as her home office for 6 years. They packed up the expensive furniture she'd never liked anyway, the abstract art that meant nothing to her, the filing cabinets full of documents that could easily live at her actual office. With each item removed, the room transformed, became less a shrine to professional achievement and more a blank canvas waiting for a child's imagination. "What color do you want to paint it?" Victoria asked as they surveyed the empty space. Lily considered this with the seriousness of someone choosing a life partner. "Purple," she said finally, "but not dark purple like grapes. light purple like lavender. Mom's favorite flower was lavender. She planted it in our garden and said it smelled like hope. Victoria's throat tightened. Lavender sounds perfect. We'll get paint tomorrow. And can I put up my butterfly posters and hang the mobile Dad made me and put glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling like I had in my old room? You can do whatever makes it feel like yours, Victoria promised. This is your room now, Lily. Your home. I want you to feel safe here. Lily was quiet for a moment, studying Victoria with those two perceptive eyes. Do you ever get scared, she asked suddenly, about us living here? About being a family? Victoria knelt down to the child's level, refusing to lie or soften the truth. Every single day, she admitted. I'm scared I'll be bad at this. That I won't know how to be what you and your dad need. That I'll say the wrong thing, or make mistakes, or disappoint you. That's how Dad feels too, Lily said matter-of-factly. He thinks I don't know, but I hear him sometimes, talking to Aunt Rachel about being scared he's messing me up by not being Mom, by not knowing the right things to say or do. Your dad is doing an amazing job, Victoria said fiercely. You're extraordinary, Lily, kind and smart and brave. That's because of how he's raised you. But he's still scared, Lily pointed out. Being scared doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means you care enough to worry about doing it right. The wisdom in those words, from a 7-year-old who'd already learned more about loss and resilience than most adults would in a lifetime, made Victoria's eyes sting with tears. When did you get so wise? She asked. I've always been wise, Lily said with the confidence of childhood. Adults just don't listen most of the time. But you listen. That's why I'm glad you're going to be my extra grown-up. Extra grown-up. Not replacement mother, not new mom. Just additional love in a life that had already held too much loss. I'm glad too, Victoria whispered. So glad. By the time Daniel arrived with Rachel and Marcus and 2 cars full of boxes, Victoria and Lily had cleared the bedroom, ordered painting supplies for next-day delivery, and made plans for how to arrange furniture. The apartment that had always felt too large and empty suddenly seemed perfectly sized for 3 people in all their accumulated chaos. Where do you want these? Marcus asked, hefting a box marked Lily Books with a grunt. This child reads more than my entire family combined. My room, Lily announced proudly, leading the way. It's going to be lavender, like hope. Rachel caught Victoria's eye as they followed the procession down the hall, mouthing, like hope, with raised eyebrows. Victoria just shook her head, unable to explain the reference without crying. They worked until midnight, unpacking essentials and stacking the rest in corners to be dealt with later. Rachel proved to be a force of nature, organizing Victoria's kitchen to accommodate Daniel's cooking supplies and reorganizing the bathroom to fit 3 people's worth of toiletries. Marcus entertained Lily by building increasingly precarious towers out of moving boxes, making her shriek with laughter every time one toppled over. By the time Rachel and Marcus finally left with promises to return tomorrow and help paint Lily's room, the apartment had transformed. It wasn't pristine anymore. It was messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. Daniel collapsed on the couch, the new couch they'd bought last week, comfortable instead of architecturally significant, and pulled Victoria down beside him. This is insane, he said, but he was smiling. 24 hours ago, I had my own place and a careful timeline for moving in together. Now we're living together, and Lily's already picked out paint colors. Having second thoughts? Victoria asked, trying to keep her voice light even though her heart was hammering. Not even a little bit, Daniel said immediately. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist. Terrified thoughts, yes. Second thoughts, no. There's a difference. What are you terrified of? Victoria asked quietly. Daniel was silent for a long moment, and Victoria could feel his heart beating against her back, could feel him choosing whether to be honest or protective. That I'm going to wake up one day, and this will be gone, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. That something will happen. You'll get sick again, or I will, or there'll be some catastrophe I can't prevent, and I'll have to survive losing someone I love all over again. And I don't think I can do it twice, Victoria. I barely survived it once. Victoria turned in his arms until she could see his face, see the fear written plainly in his eyes. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen, she said honestly. I can't promise I'll never get sick again or that life won't throw us something terrible, but I can promise that whatever happens, we face it together, that you won't be alone in it the way you were with Sarah. What if you're the one who gets sick? Daniel asked, his voice breaking. What if the cancer comes back and I have to watch you suffer like I watched her? What if I lose you too? Then you survive it, Victoria said fiercely. The same way you survived losing Sarah. The same way I survived cancer. Because that's what we do, Daniel. We survive the impossible, and we keep showing up for the people who need us. But we don't waste the time we have being paralyzed by fear of what might happen. We live. Daniel kissed her then, desperate and deep, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were wet. I love you, he said roughly. I love you so much it terrifies me, because now I have everything to lose. I love you too, Victoria said. And yes, we have everything to lose. But we also have everything to gain. Every morning we wake up together, every dinner at this table. Every time Lily shows us a drawing or tells us a butterfly fact or just exists in our space, that's what we're building, Daniel. Not some fantasy future where nothing bad ever happens, just today and tomorrow and all the ordinary days that make a life. He held her for a long time after that, both of them sitting in the quiet apartment that was now their home. Both of them choosing to be brave enough to build something despite knowing exactly how much it could hurt to lose it. Eventually, they checked on Lily and found her already asleep in Victoria's bed, surrounded by stuffed butterflies and snoring softly. They moved her to the air mattress they'd set up in the spare room, soon to be lavender room, tucking her in carefully. Victoria pressed a kiss to the child's forehead, this brave little girl who'd already survived losing her mother and was somehow still open to loving again. In Victoria's bedroom, their bedroom now, Daniel held her close in the darkness and whispered, "Thank you." For what? For choosing us, for making space in your life for all our chaos, for loving Lily like she's yours. She is mine, Victoria said simply. Not biologically, but in every way that matters. I would fight armies for that child. Daniel's arms tightened around her. I know, I see it. The way you listen to her, really listen. The way you remember details about her life. The way you asked her permission before we moved in. Sarah would have loved that about you. The way you see Lily as her own person instead of just an extension of me. The mention of Sarah didn't hurt the way Victoria thought it might. Instead, it felt right. This acknowledgement that the woman who'd come before had shaped the family Victoria was now part of. Sarah's love had created Lily. Sarah's death had taught Daniel about survival. And somehow, in the mysterious mathematics of grief and healing, Victoria had been given the gift of loving what Sarah had left behind. I wish I could have known her, Victoria said quietly. I think we would have been friends. I think so too, Daniel agreed. She would have loved your directness, your refusal to play games or pretend to be something you're not. And she would have trusted you with Lily. That's the highest compliment I can imagine. They fell asleep wrapped around each other. And for the first time since moving to this apartment 6 years ago, Victoria's bedroom didn't feel empty. It felt full, complete. Home. The next morning, Victoria woke to the sound of laughter and the smell of pancakes. She found Daniel and Lily in the kitchen, flour on both their faces, making elaborate shapes on the griddle. We're making butterfly pancakes, Lily announced. Well, Dad is making them. I'm supervising. Critical role, Victoria said solemnly. She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter, watching this scene she'd never imagined. Her kitchen filled with people she loved. Her Saturday morning no longer silent and lonely, but chaotic and perfect. Rachel's coming at 10 to help paint, Daniel said, flipping a pancake with more enthusiasm than skill. She's bringing the kids and Marcus. Fair warning, it's going to get loud. Good, Victoria said, and meant it. This place has been quiet too long. True to her word, Rachel arrived at 10 sharp with enough painting supplies to renovate an entire house, not just one bedroom. Her children descended like locusts, entertaining Lily while the adults transformed the spare room from sterile office to child sanctuary. Victoria had never painted a room before. In her childhood home, such tasks had been delegated to professionals. In her adult life, she'd hired interior designers to handle anything aesthetic. But standing in this room with Daniel on one side and Rachel on the other, painting the walls the exact shade of lavender Lily had requested, she felt something shift in her chest. This was what building a home meant. Not hiring professionals or selecting expensive furniture from catalogs. But getting paint in your hair and arguing good-naturedly about whether they needed a second coat and watching a space transform through your own effort into something that would make a child feel loved. "You're smiling," Rachel observed, dipping her roller in the paint tray. "Like, really smiling. I don't think I've ever seen you look this happy." "I don't think I've ever been this happy," Victoria admitted. "Is that crazy? Everything is chaotic and uncertain and completely different from how I planned my life. But I'm happy." "That's not crazy," Rachel said firmly. "That's what love looks like. Messy and imperfect and absolutely worth it." She glanced at Daniel, who was carefully painting around the window frame with the concentration of a surgeon. "Danny deserves this. He spent 3 years just surviving, being strong for Lily, not letting himself need anything. I'm glad he finally let himself need you." "I need him too," Victoria said quietly. "More than I ever thought I'd need anyone." By the time they finished the first coat, the walls glowed soft purple, exactly the color of hope. They broke for lunch, pizza that Marcus picked up, eaten sitting on drop cloths in the living room because the dining table was still covered in Lily's completed rainforest diorama. The children ran around like wild things, high on sugar and paint fumes, while the adults discussed second coats and furniture arrangement, and whether the glow-in-the-dark stars should form actual constellations or just random patterns. "Actual constellations," Lily insisted, "because space is cool and I want to learn them. Victoria, do you know constellations?" "Not really," Victoria admitted, "but we can learn together." "That's what grown-ups always say when they don't know something," Lily said with a child's brutal honesty. "But I like that you don't pretend. Maya's stepdad pretends to know everything, and it's annoying." Rachel snorted into her pizza. "This child, I swear." "I'm just honest," Lily said, as if this explained everything. "Mom said honesty is important, even when it's hard." The casual mention of Sarah, the way Lily kept her mother alive through small references and remembered wisdom, no longer made the adults freeze in awkward silence. It was just part of the conversation now, part of the fabric of their blended family. Sarah would always be Lily's mother, but Victoria could be something else, something additional, extra love. They finished painting by late afternoon and the room transformed completely. Lavender walls, white trim, space cleared for a bed and dresser, and all of Lily's books and butterfly collection. Tomorrow they'd apply the second coat and start moving in furniture. But already, Victoria could see what it would become, a sanctuary for a child who'd lost too much but was brave enough to build something new. That night, after everyone had left and Lily was asleep on her air mattress in her almost finished room, Daniel found Victoria standing on the balcony looking out at the city. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was thinking about the night we started this," Victoria said, "that midnight conversation in my office. When I told you no one had ever chosen me and you said you would. Best decision I ever made," Daniel murmured against her hair. "I was so scared," Victoria continued. "Scared to hope. Scared to believe that someone could see all my damage and choose me anyway. Scared that I'd built walls so high I'd never find my way out of them." "And now?" Daniel asked. Victoria turned in his arms, studying his face in the city lights. "Now I'm still scared. But it's a different kind of fear. Not the fear that I'm unlovable. The fear that I love you and Lily so much that losing you would destroy me." "So we don't lose each other," Daniel said simply. "We show up, we choose each other. Every single day we make the choice to stay." "What if something happens?" Victoria asked, voicing the terror they both carried. "What if the cancer comes back? What if your health screening finds something? What if life tears us apart the way it's done before?" "Then we survive it," Daniel said, echoing her own words from weeks ago. "Together. We survive the impossible and we keep building our life. Because the alternative is living half a life out of fear, and we're both done with that. Right?" "Right," Victoria whispered, then stronger. "Right." Daniel kissed her there on the balcony 42 stories above the city, and Victoria felt something settle deep in her bones. This was home, not the expensive penthouse or the city view or any of the material things she'd accumulated. Home was this man and the child sleeping down the hall and the chaos they'd brought into her carefully controlled life. Home was choosing to build something despite knowing it could break. Home was painting a room lavender like hope. Home was making space for someone else's grief while honoring your own. Home was three people who'd survived impossible losses, deciding they were brave enough to love anyway. Inside, her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "You're good for him, for both of them. Thank you for loving my family." Victoria typed back, "Thank you for sharing them with me." Because that's what this was. A sharing of love rather than a competition for it. Rachel hadn't lost her brother and niece to Victoria. Daniel hadn't abandoned Sarah's memory. Lily hadn't replaced her mother. They'd just expanded their definition of family to include someone new. Someone who'd spent 42 years believing she wasn't meant for this kind of love, and was still shocked, every single day, to discover she'd been wrong. The following week brought Daniel's blood work results. They came back completely normal. Cholesterol good, blood sugar fine, no concerning markers anywhere. The relief was profound but temporary, because 2 weeks after that came Victoria's next routine checkup with her oncologist. This time, walking into Dr. Patel's office with Daniel beside her and the knowledge that Lily and Rachel were waiting for them at a nearby cafe, Victoria felt different, still afraid, still carrying the weight of 10 years of scans and the constant specter of recurrence, but not alone in it, not anymore. Dr. Patel greeted them both warmly, clearly pleased to see Victoria with someone beside her after a decade of solo appointments. "How are you feeling?" she asked as Victoria settled into the familiar examination chair. "Good," Victoria said, and realized it was true. "Really good, actually. Healthier than I've been in years." "I can see that." Dr. Patel reviewed her chart. "Your energy levels are better? Sleep improved?" "Everything's improved," Victoria admitted. "I have people to go home to now, reasons to leave work at reasonable hours, a life outside of quarterly reports." "That's wonderful," Dr. Patel smiled. "Those things matter more than people realize. Stress reduction, emotional support, reasons to take care of yourself. All of that impacts long-term health outcomes." She pulled up Victoria's latest scans on the screen. "And speaking of outcomes, your scans continue to look excellent. No changes since last time. You're healthy, Victoria. Truly healthy." The words settled over Victoria like a benediction. Healthy. Not just cancer-free. Not just surviving. Actually healthy. "6 more months?" she asked, the familiar refrain. "6 more months," Dr. Patel confirmed. "But Victoria, I want you to start thinking beyond the 6-month intervals. You're 10 years out. Your prognosis is excellent. It's time to start living like someone with a future, not someone constantly waiting for disaster." Victoria felt Daniel's hand find hers, squeezing gently. "I'm trying," she said quietly. "It's hard to trust it. To believe the monster won't come back." "It might," Dr. Patel said with the honesty Victoria appreciated. "Statistics say recurrence is always possible, but you can't live your whole life in fear of what might happen. You survived, Victoria. Now it's time to actually live." Walking out of the medical building into the crisp December air, Victoria felt lighter than she had in years. 10 years of clear scans, a family waiting for her at a cafe 3 blocks away, a home that felt lived in, a life that meant more than professional achievement. Anxiously when they walked in, and anxiously when they walked in, and Victoria gave her a thumbs up that made the child's face split into a relieved grin. "All clear?" Rachel asked. "All clear," Victoria confirmed. She slid into the booth beside Lily, who immediately snuggled against her side like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I made you something," Lily said shyly, pulling a folded piece of paper from her backpack, while we were waiting. Victoria unfolded it carefully and found another drawing, this time of 4 figures holding hands with a bright sun overhead. Victoria, Daniel, Lily, and a woman with long dark hair and butterfly wings. "That's Mom," Lily explained, pointing to the winged figure. "She can't be here for real, but I wanted her in the picture anyway, because she's still part of our family, even if she's gone. Is that okay?" Victoria's throat closed around words she couldn't speak. She looked at Daniel and saw tears tracking down his face, saw Rachel pressing her hand to her mouth. This extraordinary child who understood that love didn't end with death, that families could expand to include both the living and the remembered. "It's more than okay," Victoria managed finally. "It's perfect." "Thank you, Lily." "You're welcome." Lily took a sip of her hot chocolate, leaving a whipped cream mustache that made her look even younger than 7. "I think Mom would like you. I think she'd be happy Dad's not lonely anymore. I think she would too, Victoria said, and knew it was true. Sarah, who'd planted lavender that smelled like hope. Sarah, who taught her daughter that being brave meant doing scary things anyway. Sarah, who'd loved Daniel enough to want him to be happy, even after she was gone. They spent the afternoon together, the four of them in Sarah's memory, drinking hot chocolate and making plans for the holidays. Rachel insisted on hosting Christmas dinner, promised it would be chaos with her 3 kids, plus Lily, plus various other family members, warned them that Marcus's mother would definitely interrogate Victoria about her intentions. Bring it on, Victoria said, surprising herself. I can handle board meetings. I can handle one suspicious grandmother. That's the spirit, Rachel said approvingly. Welcome to the family, Victoria. Fair warning. We're loud, we're nosy, and we're forever. No takebacks once you're in. No takebacks, Victoria repeated, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones like a promise. That night, lying in bed with Daniel beside her and Lily asleep down the hall in her now finished lavender room, Victoria thought about transformation, about how she'd spent 42 years building walls, convinced that safety meant isolation, how cancer had taught her that survival sometimes required becoming soup, dissolving everything you thought you were and rebuilding from formlessness. She'd survived. She'd transformed. And on the other side of that impossible metamorphosis, she'd found what she'd spent a lifetime believing she couldn't have: a family, love, home, the ordinary miracle of being chosen every single day. Tomorrow there would be work and responsibilities and the 1,000 complexities of blending lives. But tonight, there was just this: Daniel's steady breathing beside her, Lily's soft snores from down the hall, the knowledge that her next screening was 6 months away and she wouldn't face it alone. She'd been wrong about so many things. Wrong about cancer stealing her future. Wrong about survival meaning permanent loneliness. Wrong about needing to be perfect and undamaged to deserve love. The truth was simpler and more profound than she'd ever imagined. Love wasn't about being perfect. It was about being brave enough to be seen, scars and all. Family wasn't about biology. It was about choosing each other every single day. And home wasn't a place. It was the people who made you feel safe enough to finally stop surviving and start living. Victoria fell asleep holding Daniel's hand, butterflies painted on the walls down the hall. And for the first time in 10 years, she wasn't afraid of what the future might bring. Because whatever came, joy or sorrow, health or sickness, the ordinary beautiful terror of loving people you could lose, she wouldn't face it alone. She'd been chosen. She'd chosen back. And that made all the difference. Christmas morning arrived wrapped in fresh snow. Chicago transformed into something out of a storybook, with white coating the streets and ice crystals forming delicate patterns on the penthouse windows. Victoria woke early, as she always did, but instead of reaching for her phone to check emails, she lay still and listened to the sounds of her home coming alive. Daniel's steady breathing beside her, the padding of small feet in the hallway, the soft creak of Lily's door opening, and then her excited whisper down the hall. Dad, Victoria, it snowed. Can we build a snowman before we go to Aunt Rachel's? Victoria smiled into the darkness, watching the first light of dawn paint the ceiling gold. 6 months ago, she would have spent Christmas morning alone in this apartment, maybe calling Rachel's family for a brief holiday greeting before diving back into work. Now her home was filled with evidence of life lived. Lily's butterfly collection displayed on new shelves, Sarah's framed photos integrated seamlessly with new family pictures, Daniel's coffee mugs in the cabinet beside hers, plants that Victoria had managed not to kill yet scattered throughout the living room. And in the corner of the living room stood a Christmas tree, slightly lopsided, because Lily had insisted on picking the ugly one that nobody else would choose, decorated with a chaotic mix of expensive ornaments Victoria had owned for years, and handmade creations Lily had crafted with construction paper and glitter. It's 6 a.m, Daniel groaned, but Victoria heard the smile in his voice. Normal children sleep until at least 7 on Christmas. I'm not normal, Lily announced proudly, appearing in their doorway already dressed in mismatched pajamas and wearing the reindeer antlers Rachel had given her at Thanksgiving. I'm exceptional. Victoria said so. I did say that, Victoria agreed, sitting up and reaching for her robe. And exceptional children deserve exceptional Christmas mornings. Let's build that snowman. Daniel looked at her like she'd suggested skydiving without a parachute. You want to go outside? In the snow? At 6 in the morning? Why not? Victoria said, surprising herself with the lightness in her voice. When's the last time you built a snowman? With Sarah, Daniel said quietly. The winter before she died. Lily was 4 and wanted to make an entire snow family. The mention of Sarah no longer hung heavy in the air like it once had. They'd learned to speak her name naturally, to honor her memory without being imprisoned by it. Lily had been the one to teach them that, with her casual references to when Mom was alive and her matter-of-fact inclusion of Sarah's memory in their daily lives. Then it's definitely time, Victoria said firmly. She kissed Daniel softly. Come on, let's make new memories without erasing the old ones. An hour later, they stood in Grant Park bundled against the cold, building what Lily declared was not a snowman, but a snow butterfly. She'd insisted the body be horizontal rather than vertical, had used sticks for antennae, and was currently trying to convince them that they needed to find colored snow to make the wings realistic. Sweetheart, snow doesn't come in colors, Daniel explained patiently, the same conversation they'd had twice already. Then we'll paint it, Lily said, as if this were obvious, with food coloring, like we do for sugar cookies. That's actually brilliant, Victoria said, watching Lily's face light up with vindication. We'll get food coloring on the way home and make rainbow wings. Victoria, we're going to Rachel's in 3 hours, Daniel pointed out. We don't have time to... We have time, Victoria interrupted gently. She reached for his hand, squeezing once. We have all the time we need. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, and Victoria saw understanding dawn in his eyes. This was what living looked like instead of just surviving. Making time for food-colored snow and rainbow butterfly wings. Prioritizing Lily's joy over schedules and efficiency. Choosing presence over productivity. Okay, he said finally, his smile soft and real. Rainbow wings it is. By the time they arrived at Rachel's house, they were running an hour late, covered in food coloring that had somehow gotten on their clothes despite everyone's best efforts. And Lily was carrying photos of their rainbow snow butterfly on Victoria's phone to show her cousins. Rachel took one look at them and burst out laughing. You're late. You're covered in what appears to be blue dye, and you all look happier than I've seen you in years, she said, pulling them into the chaos of her home, where Christmas music played too loud and children ran in circles, and the scent of cinnamon and roasting turkey filled the air. Get in here before Marcus's mother asks why you look like you lost a fight with a Smurf. The day dissolved into the beautiful chaos of family. Too much food, too many presents, children hyped up on sugar and excitement, adults trying to have conversations while being constantly interrupted. Victoria found herself in the kitchen with Rachel and Marcus's mother Helen, the grandmother who'd promised to interrogate her. So you're the CEO who stole my grandson's heart, Helen said without preamble, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. Rachel says you're good for him, that you understand his grief. Victoria measured her words carefully. I don't know if I'd say I stole his heart. I think we found each other when we both needed finding. Pretty words, Helen said, but her tone was more assessing than critical. My daughter-in-law died young. Left my grandson to raise a baby alone. That changes a man, makes him careful, scared to hope for too much. I know, Victoria said quietly. I've been scared too, for different reasons, but the fear is the same. Helen studied her with eyes that had seen 7 decades of life and weren't easily fooled. Rachel told me about your cancer, that you survived what should have killed you. I did. And you think surviving something terrible makes you understand my grandson's loss? Helen's voice was sharp. Death and illness aren't the same thing, child. No, they're not, Victoria agreed. But they both teach you that life is fragile, that the people you love can be taken without warning. That fear is the price of loving anyone. She met Helen's gaze steadily. I can't promise Daniel that nothing bad will ever happen. I can't promise I'll never get sick again. But I can promise that I love him and Lily with everything I have, that I show up every day, that I'm not going anywhere by choice. Helen was quiet for a moment, her knife stilling on the cutting board. Then unexpectedly, she smiled. You'll do, she said simply. You've got steel in your spine and honesty in your words. That's what he needs. What they both need. From the living room came the sound of Lily's laughter, Daniel's deeper chuckle, chaos and joy and life being lived fully. Victoria felt something settle in her chest that had been restless for 42 years. "Thank you," she said to Helen, "for accepting me into this family." "Family isn't about acceptance," Helen said wisely. "It's about showing up. You keep showing up, child, and you'll always be family." The afternoon stretched into evening. Presents opened and dinner consumed and children finally crashing from their sugar highs. Victoria found herself on Rachel's back porch with Daniel, both of them wrapped in blankets, and watching snow fall gentle and silent in the darkness. "This is the first Christmas since Sarah died that hasn't felt like I was just going through the motions," Daniel said quietly. "The first one where I actually felt happy instead of just pretending for Lily's sake." "Is that okay?" Victoria asked, understanding the guilt that came with moving forward. "Are you okay with being happy?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I think so. Finally. I think Sarah would want this for us. For Lily to have another person who loves her unconditionally. For me to have someone who understands that grief doesn't end, but life continues anyway." He pulled Victoria closer. "Rachel asked me last week if I was planning to propose, if this was heading toward marriage." Victoria's heart stuttered in her chest. "What did you tell her?" "That I wanted to, that I think about it constantly, but that I'm terrified of messing it up, of moving too fast or not fast enough, of somehow dishonoring Sarah's memory or making Lily feel like I'm replacing her mother." He took a shaky breath. "I'm 48 years old. I've been married before. I should know how to do this. But with you, everything feels brand new and terrifying and absolutely right all at once." Victoria turned in his arms until she could see his face in the dim light from the kitchen windows. "I'm terrified too," she admitted. "I never thought I'd get married. After Marcus left, after the cancer, I convinced myself that kind of future wasn't for me, that I'd build a different kind of life focused on career and success. But now?" Daniel prompted, his voice rough with emotion. "Now I want everything," Victoria said fiercely. "I want the ring and the ceremony and the legal binding of our lives together. I want to be Lily's stepmother officially. I want to grow old with you and face every cancer screening together and build a life that's messy and imperfect and absolutely ours." "Is that a yes?" Daniel asked, and Victoria realized he was trembling. "If I were to ask you, hypothetically, to marry me, would you say yes?" "Is this a hypothetical proposal?" Victoria asked, her voice shaking with laughter and tears and overwhelming emotion. "Maybe," Daniel said. "Or maybe I'm just too scared to do it properly. Maybe I'm terrified you'll say no, that you'll realize you could have someone easier, someone without a dead wife and a traumatized child and enough baggage to fill a cargo plane." Victoria cupped his face in her hands, making him look at her. "Daniel Reed, you are the bravest, kindest, most extraordinary man I've ever met. You survived the impossible and kept showing up for your daughter. You chose me when I was convinced I was unchosen. You've made space in your life for me without erasing Sarah's memory. You've taught me that family isn't about biology or perfection. It's about showing up and choosing each other every single day." She took a shaky breath. "So yes, hypothetically or actually or however you want to ask it, yes, I will marry you. I will be Lily's stepmother. I will face every uncertain future beside you. I will choose you every single day for as long as you'll have me." Daniel kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he was crying and laughing simultaneously. "I don't have a ring yet," he admitted. "I wanted to ask Lily first. Make sure she was okay with it. Make sure you weren't going to run when faced with the reality of permanent commitment." "I'm not running," Victoria said firmly. "Not from you. Not from Lily. Not from this beautiful, terrifying, absolutely perfect life we're building." They went inside together to find Lily asleep on the couch, curled up against Rachel's youngest daughter with a contentment that made Victoria's chest ache. Rachel looked up when they entered, took one look at their faces, and grinned. "It's about damn time," she whispered, careful not to wake the sleeping children. "I was starting to think I'd have to propose on your behalf." "We need to talk to Lily," Daniel said quietly, "before we make anything official. She deserves to be part of this decision." "She already knows," Rachel said matter-of-factly. "She told me 3 weeks ago that you were going to marry Victoria, and could I please help her find a fancy dress for the wedding, because she wanted to be the flower girl." Victoria felt tears spill over. "She said that?" That child is perceptive as hell, Rachel said affectionately. She sees everything, and what she sees is you and Danny building something good together, something that includes her. She's not scared of you replacing her mother, Victoria. She's excited to have another person who loves her unconditionally. They woke Lily gently when it was time to leave, bundling her into her coat and carrying her to the car when she proved too sleepy to walk. In the back seat, Victoria held the drowsy child while Daniel drove through snow-quiet streets. "Did you have a good Christmas?" Victoria whispered. "The best," Lily mumbled against her shoulder. "We built a rainbow butterfly and ate too much pie, and you and Dad were happy. Really happy. Not pretend happy." "We were," Victoria agreed. "We are." "Are you going to get married?" Lily asked, her voice clear now, more alert. "Dad keeps looking at you like people do in movies before they get married." Victoria glanced at Daniel in the rearview mirror and saw him nod slightly, giving her permission to be honest. "Would that be okay with you?" Victoria asked carefully. "If your dad and I got married? If I became your stepmother officially?" Lily was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria's heart hammered against her rib. This child's acceptance meant everything. Without it, none of this worked. "Mom used to say that love multiplies, it doesn't divide," Lily said finally. "That having more people to love doesn't mean you love the people you already have any less. I love Dad, and I love Mom, even though she's gone. And I love you too, Victoria. Different kinds of love, but all real." She sat up straighter, looking at Victoria with those two old eyes that had already seen too much loss. "So yes, it's okay. Better than okay. Because you make Dad happy, and you listen to my butterfly facts, and you don't pretend to know things you don't know, and you painted my room lavender, like hope." Her voice wavered slightly. "And you're not trying to replace Mom. You're just adding more love to our family. That's what Mom would have wanted. More love, not less." Victoria pulled Lily into a tight embrace, unable to speak through the tears streaming down her face. In the front seat, Daniel's shoulders shook with silent sobs. They sat like that in the parking garage of Victoria's building, three people who'd survived impossible losses choosing to be brave enough to build something new. Finally, Daniel turned to face them both, his eyes red but his smile genuine. "Then I guess I need to get a ring," he said, "and plan a proper proposal. One that includes both of you, since this is a family decision." "Can we get a cat?" Lily asked immediately. "Maya's family got a cat when her moms got married. She says it's good luck." Victoria laughed despite her tears. "We can get a cat." "An orange one," Lily insisted. "Orange cats are the silliest, and we need silly. We've been too serious for too long." "Orange cat it is," Daniel agreed. He looked at Victoria with such love it made her chest ache. "Anything else we need for this new family we're building?" Victoria thought about her life 6 months ago. The empty apartment, the lonely dinners, the conviction that survival meant accepting permanent solitude. She thought about Daniel's midnight confession that he would choose her, about Lily's drawing with Sarah's memory included, about Rachel's fierce protection and Helen's grudging acceptance. She thought about lavender rooms and rainbow snow butterflies, and the ordinary miracle of building a family from broken pieces. "Just this," she said, taking Daniel's hand in one of hers and Lily's in the other. "Just us. Choosing each other, every single day." The proposal happened 2 weeks later, orchestrated with Lily's enthusiastic assistance. Victoria came home from a board meeting to find the apartment transformed. Fairy lights strung everywhere, butterfly decorations hanging from the ceiling, photos covering every surface. Photos of Daniel and Sarah, of Lily as a baby, of Victoria's cancer battle, of their first dinner together, of the butterfly sanctuary and Christmas morning, and every moment that had led them to this point. And in the center of it all stood Daniel and Lily, both holding a small box together. "We have a question," Lily announced formally, clearly having rehearsed this. "We've been a family for a while now, but we want to make it official. Will you marry us, Victoria? Will you be my extra mom and dad's wife and part of our family forever?" Victoria's vision blurred with tears as Daniel opened the box to reveal a simple platinum band with 3 stones, sapphire, diamond, and emerald. "Blue for Lily," Daniel explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Diamond for Sarah because she's part of this family too. And emerald for you, for growth, for healing, for the new life we're building together." Victoria couldn't speak. She could only nod as Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger and Lily launched herself into her arms, chattering excitedly about wedding plans and whether butterflies could be part of the ceremony and could she please help pick out Victoria's dress. Yes, Victoria managed finally. Yes to all of it. To marriage and family and butterflies at the ceremony and forever with both of you. They stood together in the apartment that had been sterile and empty 6 months ago and was now overflowing with life, three people who'd learned that survival was just the beginning. That transformation required becoming soup first, dissolving into formlessness before rebuilding into something capable of flight. That love wasn't about being perfect or undamaged. It was about being brave enough to be seen, scars and all. The wedding took place in April in a botanical garden that Sarah had loved, with butterflies released during the ceremony and Lily serving as flower girl in a dress she'd picked out herself. Rachel cried through the entire event. Helen gave a toast about showing up being the truest form of love. The orange kitten they'd adopted, named Monarch by unanimous vote, wore a tiny bow tie and photobombed most of the pictures. Victoria wore a dress that showed her mastectomy scar, refusing to hide the evidence of her survival. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Lily stood up solemnly and said, "I object to anyone saying this isn't a real family just because we're not all related by blood. This is the realest family I know." The crowd erupted in laughter and applause, and Daniel pulled both Victoria and Lily into an embrace while butterflies danced overhead, and Sarah's memory blessed them from wherever she existed now. At the reception, Victoria's assistant Jennifer approached with tears in her eyes. "I've worked for you for 8 years," she said, "and I've never seen you this happy, this alive." "I was surviving," Victoria said simply. "Now I'm living. There's a difference." Later, dancing with Daniel while Lily twirled with her cousins nearby, Victoria thought about the night this had all started. Standing alone in her corner office at midnight, confessing to an employee that no one had ever chosen her, the desperate loneliness of success without connection, the certainty that cancer had stolen any chance of normal life. She'd been so wrong about everything. Cancer hadn't stolen her future. It had taught her that survival required transformation, that sometimes you had to dissolve completely before you could rebuild into something capable of flight. Her infertility hadn't made her less than. It had opened her to a different kind of family, one built on choice rather than biology. Her scars weren't evidence of being broken. They were proof she'd fought and won. "What are you thinking?" Daniel murmured against her hair. "That I spent 42 years believing I was unchosen," Victoria said. "That I'd built walls so high nobody could reach me. That survival meant accepting loneliness as the price of staying alive." "And now?" Daniel asked, pulling back to see her face. "Now I know I was wrong," Victoria said simply. "I wasn't unchosen. I was just waiting for the right people to choose. And when they did, when you did, I was brave enough to choose you back." She looked around the reception at all the people who'd become her family. Rachel and Marcus and their chaos crew. Helen, with her sharp wisdom and fierce love. Lily and her cousins, already planning mischief. The orange cat that had somehow ended up at the wedding despite everyone's best efforts. Daniel's coworkers from Hale Innovations, people who'd watched their relationship develop from that first disclosed conversation with HR Dr. Patel, who'd kept Victoria alive and was now wiping away tears at the celebration of life that survival had made possible. This was what transformation looked like. Not the dramatic moments of crisis or the clean resolution of fairy tales, just the daily choice to show up, to be vulnerable, to build something beautiful from broken pieces. "I love you," Victoria whispered to Daniel, to Lily spinning past them, to all the people who'd chosen her and let themselves be chosen in return. "I love all of this. Every messy, imperfect, absolutely perfect piece of it." "Even the cat who's currently trying to eat the wedding cake?" Daniel asked, nodding toward where Monarch had climbed onto the dessert table. "Especially the cat," Victoria said, laughing. "He's part of our family now. We chose him too." They danced until the garden lights came on and the butterflies settled into sleep, and Lily finally crashed from her sugar high, curled up on a bench with her flower crown askew. Daniel carried her to the car while Victoria gathered the remnants of the celebration, her wedding ring catching the light, 3 stones representing past and present and future, all bound together. Driving home through the spring night, Lily asleep in the back seat and Daniel's hand warm in hers, Victoria thought about the opening hook that had started this journey, the woman no one chose. The CEO standing alone at midnight, convinced that success and solitude were the same thing. She'd been wrong about so many things, but she'd been right about one. Everyone deserved to be chosen. Everyone deserved to build a family in whatever form that took. Everyone deserved the chance to transform from caterpillar to butterfly, to dissolve into soup and rebuild into something capable of flight. And she had. They all had. 3 people marked by loss, choosing to be brave enough to build something new, choosing each other, every single day. At home, their home, with Lily's drawings on the fridge and Sarah's photos on the walls and Monarch's toys scattered across the floor, they carried their sleeping daughter to bed and stood together in the doorway watching her breathe. "Thank you," Daniel whispered. "For what?" Victoria asked. "For choosing us. For being brave enough to let us choose you back. For transforming our lives into something I never thought we'd have again." Victoria leaned into his warmth. This man who'd seen her scars and chosen her anyway, who'd taught her that survival was just the beginning of the story. "Thank you for seeing me," she said quietly. Not the CEO or the cancer survivor or the woman who'd convinced herself she didn't need anyone. Just me, Victoria, broken and healing and finally brave enough to believe I deserved to be loved. They stood together in the doorway while Lily slept and Monarch curled up at the foot of her bed and the city lights painted patterns across the walls. 3 people who'd survived impossible things. A family built on choice and courage and the radical belief that transformation was always possible. Victoria Hale had spent 42 years believing she was the woman no one chose. But she'd been wrong. She hadn't been unchosen. She'd been waiting for Daniel's steady love, for Lily's fierce acceptance, for Sarah's memory to bless their future, for the courage to stop surviving and start living. And now, finally, she was home. Not in a sterile penthouse overlooking the city, but in a life filled with people who chose her every single day. In a family built from broken pieces and brave choices. In the beautiful, terrifying, absolutely perfect chaos of being loved. She'd dissolved into soup and emerged capable of flight. She'd faced the monster of cancer and won. She'd survived betrayal and loneliness and 10 years of believing survival was all she deserved. But survival wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. And the beginning looked like this. Daniel's hand in hers, Lily's soft breathing, Monarch's contented purr. A home that felt lived in. A family that felt chosen. A future that felt possible. No one had chosen her, she'd once believed, but she'd been catastrophically, beautifully wrong. Everyone had chosen her. She'd chosen them back. And together, they'd built something that no catastrophe could destroy. A family. A home. A life. Love multiplied. It didn't divide. More different kinds. All real. And Victoria Hale, CEO and cancer survivor. And the woman who'd once stood alone at midnight, convinced she was meant for solitude, was finally, completely, perfectly chosen.